Whenever you're ready. Yeah.
What's today? 29. You ready? Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tonight is night 3 of the continued hearing for the application of Rockwell Downingtown PRD ordinance and Lionville Preserve Plan, tentative plan. As I said, we met on July 23rd and July 27th. Just a few notes before we begin. I want to remind everyone that this is a hearing, so if you need to have a conversation with your neighbor or take a phone call, we'd ask that you step outside so that we can have a good record with our court reporter here. If you need to take a break, there's a restroom down the hallway here, and we will be taking a break at the top of the 8 o'clock hour as well for a little refresh. I also want to remind everyone that tonight's hearing is being recorded and live streamed on the Uwchlan Township YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Freed, our township solicitor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're going to continue with the hearing. Let me just lay out where we are, what's going to happen next, and what we expect or hope to happen the rest of the night. So the board has a couple follow-up questions for Mr. Stratton on stormwater. We're going to cover that. At that point, we're then going to proceed with, we're going to continue with the cross-examination by parties. We got through some folks, but there are other folks that didn't have an opportunity yet to cross-examine on the issues that were discussed by Mr. Stratton. Then the applicant's going to move to additional witnesses. The plan is to cover traffic, financial impact, emergency services, and we'll run through the same thing where people will have enough, parties will have an opportunity. The board will have an opportunity to ask questions. Parties will have an opportunity to ask questions. And then at that point, once the applicant's done with their case, we will move to the parties' cases, the other parties' cases. And so I just want to reiterate that as parties, you do have the opportunity to present witnesses. Some people are going to be their own witness. So you do have the opportunity to present sworn testimony, which will be considered evidence. Understanding that as a witness, you're going to be subject to questions from the board as well as cross-examination from the applicant, potentially other parties. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but potentially you could have questions from other parties. So, and then at that point, and we're hoping to get it all done tonight. That's probably, or that may be over optimistic. And then we'll be open for public comment, particularly anyone can have a public comment, including those that are not, with party status. With that, we'll turn it over to the board to continue their questioning, and then we'll turn it over to questioning by the rest of the parties.
Thank you. Just a few additional stormwater questions. Kind of got lost in the piles of stuff up here, so I apologize for that. Earlier this week, we talked a little bit about the Pickering Creek's high quality water designation and its support of native and stocked trout populations in reference to the stormwater measures that would be taken on the property. And a couple things that I just wanted to explore a little bit further, given the township and the Environmental Advisory Council's interest in water quality. The Pickering Creek has various agencies that track the water quality that's on this property. In conjunction with the Chester County Water Resources Authority and the Stroud Research Center, they test for biotic integrity, the presence of nitrogen, phosphates, and chloride. And in 3 of those areas, the Pickering Creek actually performs way better than the county average in water quality. And so for us in Uwchlan Township, it's important to us, like you said, that our stormwater does not degrade the quality and that it's, in fact, maybe if we have an opportunity to improve it. The one area where it does not perform consistent with the other areas is in chloride levels, as far as salt runoff that enters the creeks. And so my question to you is, when you're looking at the stormwater design on the property, we talked about above ground infrastructure and below ground infiltration beds and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about your consideration for how those infrastructures might be selected based on, you know, the goal of preserving the groundwater around the headwaters, the Pickering?
Sure. The above ground systems generally collect stormwater runoff close to its source. And the underground systems typically collect runoff that's piped to them, hopefully nearby, but not always. And in addition to collecting and managing rates and volumes, there are also things in place per the Conservation District and DEP, which require that water to be filtered before it even enters one of our systems. That helps prolong the system's life, but it also improves the quality of the discharge of that water to the nearby streams. And I believe I mentioned before that nature does a wonderful job of managing stormwater for us. So we will take opportunities to use nature as much as we can, whether it be vegetative separation between where the stormwater runoff is discharged and when it enters the system. If it can run through a vegetative filter strip, that will help remove some of those pollutants because nature does a wonderful job at removing those for us.
So, because I'm not an engineer, my question, as far as filtration beds, you know, we talked about the underground filtration. Is that mostly applicable to a sediment load or something like sodium chloride that's more of a chemical component? Because it's my understanding that the infiltration doesn't remove the sodium chloride.
The infiltration beds are designed to collect the water and then promote infiltration into the ground. Before it enters the stormwater system, it may have been filtered by some man-made device, or like I said, some vegetative filter that removes some of those pollutants from the system itself. And dilution also helps. When this water enters the aquifer, it's diluted. So when it combines with other groundwater sources, that is diluted the pollutant. But hopefully the goal is to remove those pollutants before they enter our system. And that can be done with man-made devices. Sometimes those are filter baskets in inlet boxes. And sometimes it's vegetative filter before it enters our systems. But the infiltration itself doesn't really remove some of those pollutants. They're just too small and too finite to really remove through movement.
So to that effect, the township has undertaken measures to address and look at the impact of salt throughout the township, not just the Pickering Creek. They've hosted trainings on site to prepare contractors on proper salt application techniques, calibration of equipment, and that type of thing. Is the applicant willing to integrate measures like that to further protect the headwaters from further runoff? That could look like I just said, salt application training for contractors that are performing salt operations, a winter operations maintenance plan in conjunction with the township, and then potential monitoring of the discharge to the Pickering Creek?
We strongly encourage our HOAs and in our homeowners association, as well as on our warranty, that people cannot use salt if they want to maintain warranties on things like exterior concrete. And so we're strongly discouraging that. That should not be used as a means of ice melt. I have talked to some of the neighbors because some of the concern also is for our neighbors above us that are on well water. They've had the same concern, like, what happens if you pollute our wells, for instance. And what I've agreed to do there is to use Chester County's well water guidelines, and we can do a test prior to construction and then a couple periodic tests after that to see if there's any problems that have been caused. But we are absolutely on board with you that this needs to remain a pristine watershed.
And then the same question kind of from a thermal perspective, just again, because it's a high quality water way that supports aquatic life and trout and has a healthy biotic profile. Do you implement thermal impacts in your stormwater modeling? And can you talk a little bit about how that might have guided your decision process for the infrastructure?
Yes, the good news is the County Conservation District and DEP require us to mitigate thermal impacts. As you know, runoff from a warm parking lot could have an impact to discharging to a stream. So again, it's separation of that water, giving it proper time to settle and sit in our stormwater basins before it is discharged. All of that helps mitigate that thermal impact.
Thank you.
Anything further on stormwater? Anything further from the board for the witness?
No.
No.
All right, so we're going to go back to the parties. I know there were a few folks that we got not quite halfway through the list, but I know there were a few parties who had left by the time Mr. Stratton was finished. So I'm going to ask if there were 3 or 4. Ms. Widener, do you have any questions based on Mr. Stratton's testimony or any of the township witnesses in response to that? No, just the civil engineering generally. The testimony from Mr. Stratton's testimony from the last hearing and this hearing. Do you have any questions?
My only statement is that the last.
Well, I'm gonna.
Oh, I do have a question.
Okay.
You may not consider this part of this particular aspect of it, but comments from everybody went on for 3 hours and 10 minutes. It was very difficult with all the information and all the waivers requested to focus. And so now I appreciate the opportunity. I particularly wanted to ask the gentleman who was over here, who testified Monday night about the open space preservation funds from the township, where I heard him say that perhaps the 38 acres would not be acquired by the township, and that we were now looking at possibly 89 acres of open space in this development. And I would like, I don't see him here. Oh, there he is. Yes, thank you. A clarification on whether or not the township has used open space funds to purchase land in this development. So can I get a clarification on that from this gentleman here?
I think we can let Mr. Daly address it. I do think that issue's been addressed a few times, but I think Mr. Daly, if you're able to clarify that for the witness, for the Ms. Widener.
I think it may be better for me to address it.
Okay, that's fine.
Bobby Cagle, I'm the township manager. So the township and the applicant have discussed placing a conservation easement on approximately 38 acres of land. Those 38 acres represent developable land. So land that something could be built there. The township is not interested in a fee simple acquisition of the property. That is, having those approximately 38 acres be put in the township's name. But instead, the township is interested in purchasing a conservation easement. And so what that does is it permanently protects and delineates that set of open space. And working with French and Pickering Creek conservation trusts who would hold the easement. And what that means is they would have responsibility to monitor it and inspect it every year. And we would, working with the applicant, we would develop a set of conservation measures, because the whole purpose of a conservation easement is to improve the conservation value of that land. And so improvements such as planting native meadows and other kinds of improvements. If we are, and again, we have agreed in principle to these things, we still need to work out the specific details. The township has gone forward with obtaining an appraisal for that based on the purchase of this conservation easement. And that would entail $5 million of the township's open space funds to be used to purchase that conservation easement. But at this point, no documents have been signed, nothing has been formally agreed to. There's not been any exchange of dollars or anything like that.
Do you see that 38 acres as being jeopardized, or will it definitely happen?
I can't speak definitively on that. Again, the applicant and the township have come to what I would say is an agreement in principle. And perhaps Mr. Lingo wants to confirm that at some point, but I believe that we have come to an agreement in principle and would look to move forward with that once we're beyond the hearings and there are if there are approvals in place, work to finalize that the specific details of that conservation easement, the exact location of that conservation easement, and make that happen.
We're in agreement with that.
And just, Mr. Cagle, just to clarify, that's what you're talking about is if there's actually an approval or a conditioned approval of the tentative plan, tentative approval.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Ms. Dwyer? All right. Mr. Siegel? Or Ms. Siegel? All right, so now we're up to Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. McLaughlin. Okay. Mr. Chadsey?
I have just one couple of questions. The Planning and Zoning Commission had recommended this project go forward without the swim park. So my question is if your decision is to eliminate the swim center, does that throw your Rockwell's development costs, et cetera, into another where we have to redo everything? Or is the way that's structured that sort of doesn't matter a whole lot whether that happens or not?
It's part of our agreement with the seller that we would cause this swim center to be developed on the property. So if it was not, if this was approved but without the swim center, we'd have to go back to the seller and rework that deal.
Okay. All right. So financially, is it a big, I wasn't quite sure how the swim center land was that going to be donated by you, or are they paying you for that? Or is that, I was just more curious about the financial part.
Yeah,
When
the financial part between Rockwell, Downingtown, and Phil Aquatics is, a private contractual agreement, but I'm happy to say that we are donating that land.
Okay. So financially, it doesn't really matter to you so much whether it happens or not, but
That's not necessarily true. It's a difference financially, but But as I said, it's up to the board to decide if
Yeah.
they want it or not.
Okay, and my other question is, maybe this isn't the right time to ask this, on the improvements to Lionville Station Road, et cetera, and dealing with the intersection at the bottom, as to what, nothing has been really said other than sort of a brief footnote on that, or Hankin doesn't want to talk to you about selling the house. What steps are going to be taken to improve Lionville Station Road and to fix the intersection, or entice the Hankin Group to sell that property, et cetera?
So we've made an offer to purchase the property that has not been accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, it's off of our property and not something necessarily we can control.
Mm-hmm.
We have agreed with regard to traffic, and you'll hear our traffic testimony this evening, to make some off-site improvements in other locations that we can do and are welcome to do in other townships. But we don't own that property, and it is private property.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess the other question would be for the township. I don't know if I can ask you a question, but just what can be done, because that intersection at this point is basically out of control. So having another large development happen that's going to add yet more traffic to it, it's kind of catastrophically bad at the moment. I actually was almost involved in getting taken out, standing in my driveway yesterday by somebody, by a almost head-on crash there, that if it had happened, it would have probably gotten me too, standing there.
Yeah.
So it's just, I see this, this thing being, something has to be done. So I don't know what we can do, but I just,
Well, I mean, I think you can reassert that when you're during your testimony, if you want that to be part of the record.
okay. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Fertel?
Just for clarification, can you outline the walking path on the left side of the property? Is it a loop, or is it
Is
just
there a
a
laser
straight?
pointer?
Yes, I can describe it and point to the exhibit on the screen here. The walking path on the east side of the property starts at one of the interior roads right here in the east central section of the property, and then it continues southward towards the southeast corner of the development. That is one leg of the pedestrian trails. The other portion of the trail begins at the northwest corner of the proposed parking lot for the aquatic center. There's a trailhead here. There's also an outdoor amphitheater proposed. And so that trailhead enters into this natural area where there is a stream, there's wetlands, and that pedestrian path runs parallel to the stream. It continues northward until it reaches this Haywood Drive crossing. The path would cross the stream, and then it would continue southward again. And then there would be a pedestrian bridge or a pedestrian crossing across the stream to connect back to the trail where you began. So that is the pedestrian network of trails. There's also proposed sidewalks throughout the development, but the trails are limited to the east portion of the property and then through the center of the property in this natural area.
Thank you. So while we're talking about this,
Just to jump in there, we're also open to other opportunities for passive nature trails. So that's something that we can continue to work with as the plans develop.
okay, so while we're talking about that, and the fact that you have people that are going to be close to the headwaters, is there some thought about how to protect the headwaters from just that kind of traffic. I'm sure they're not going to be throwing, stuff into it, but that awareness. And I guess really the houses in the top left-hand corner, what keeps them from using Agent Orange on their lawns or whatever that.
Oh, the HOA would probably prohibit the use of any harmful chemicals. And the HOA does all of the maintenance and the lawn care. So it's not the responsibility of the homeowner to do that. And then to your first question about, how do we protect this stream? I think with signage and proper education on the users, perhaps there's some wayfinding signs with an educational piece about, how to protect it and how to take care of it.
Okay. And then on the traffic circle in the north, will there be a sidewalk around that for people that want to traverse from right to left?
There will be crossings, pedestrian crossings, not necessarily through the center, but at strategic locations so that pedestrians can get to all four sides of that roundabout. Yes,
That's part of the plan.
yes,
And then you mentioned the connection to Haywood Drive in the top left-hand corner.
yes.
What happens beyond that at Haywood and East Township Line Road? Is there a plan for a light there or
Our
traffic study?
The traffic engineer will address potential improvements at that intersection.
Okay. This is an easy one. So the swim facility plans on having a number of events that require overflow traffic to be shuttled from somewhere else. Is there some thought to somehow restricting that overflow from going into the off-street parking on the lower right-hand side?
So the swim center is limited to having 4 large events per year, and a traffic plan will be developed that the township will need to approve. The HOA will need probably be a part of reviewing that to ensure that shuttling those people on and off the site is done in the best manner possible.
Well, I'm just saying people will probably try to avoid that shuttle and park in the neighborhood, and I don't know if that's going to cause a problem for your customers or not. So something to consider. That's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miss Denny? No?
Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Denny. I apologize.
Last week, I had asked about the woods and if the HOA would have the ability to clear any of that. And you mentioned that they would have to go through an approval process like anyone else would. And I didn't ask what that was. However, the other night, the same thing came up, and I don't recall if it was the Conservancy or the landscape suggested that there's restrictions put into the deed before it transfers to the HOA that would spell out that they are not able to clear those woods. And I believe one of you responded that that is a possibility.
Yes, I think that is possible with HOA to have that codified.
What would lean one way or the other for that, whether it's written in there that they can't do that?
Likely maintenance, a lot of times trees, just because they're old doesn't mean they're healthy. So in some cases they may have to remove things, but they would need to get a permit to do that.
And what's that permit?
No idea what the township requirement would be.
So it's the township approvals.
They would, if there was something that they were looking to clear, they would need to get permission to do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Blatcher? I'm sorry? Okay, thank you. Ms. Lager? Mr. Lager?
I think that there's blockage of the left-hand corner where it says residential units. Earlier, there was another drawing up there that didn't have that because I wanted to ask about the distances from my house to the houses that are planned. So is there a way to pull up the?
Yeah. We have that slide, I believe. Bobby, can you go to where it doesn't, maybe it's the last one? Yes. Doesn't have the,
Oh, that's much better. Okay. Thank you. I live at 105 Silver Fox Lane, which I think is the second cul-de-sac from the right.
Correct. Silver Fox,
That's,
correct.
I believe that is my house, kind of straight down from it. So I just have a few questions about distance. I get an idea of the distance from the property line between my house and Rockwell to the back of the houses that are planned for that area.
So if you can tell me your address, I can make a quick 105, I assume? Yeah.
And then it's blocked.
Yeah. From your house to the tract boundary is about 165 feet. And then from the tract boundary to the nearest house proposed, if you give me a moment. Is another 340 feet. So 500 total between your house and the closest proposed house.
And can you tell me what it is between, again, that's right, from property line to the houses we're talking about? Now, you said from my house, I was meant property line on the structure.
So if I'm measuring between your property line and the property line of the nearest home, 325 feet.
And while we're on that, do you have an estimate for how far my property line would be to Haywood Drive Extension? Middle of it or an estimate?
To the edge of the cartway from your property line, approximately 435 feet, give or take.
Thank you. When we had the last meeting, I believe that Greg had mentioned that phase one is now probably going to be on the right-hand side, and phase two is area near that area. But I know it's not sure, but I think that's what you.
yeah, so earlier we did review the phasing a little bit, but the first phase will be this connection from Haywood Drive to the circle.
So I know there's a lot of. Do you have a general idea about when the tree removal and the construction would start in phase two behind my house?
No idea.
Yes.
No, it really depends if this gets approved and then how long it takes to get to a final plan approval. And there's a bunch of other moving parts.
And then I just have a couple questions about the amphitheater section, the other side. I think the amphitheater is that just south of the natatorium there.
No, he's got a marker on it there. It's just next to the trail and the parking lot.
Oh, that's the Oh, I thought it was down, okay, right off. Okay, that's the amphitheater. So, is there gonna be enough parking for when there's an amphitheater event and the natatorium?
If there was a, as you say, a big natatorium event, they would be going through the township and picking the date. Currently, we're envisioning dedicating the amphitheater also to the township, so there could be some coordination there to make sure that there wasn't the same date. Similarly, on big natatorium days, the 4 a year, they would be working with the school district who's providing additional parking for them, and they wouldn't do it necessarily on a Friday night football game where they needed the parking lots. So there's a lot of coordination that would still need to occur.
Mr. Louder, could I ask you to get
Yeah.
closer to the microphone? Thank you.
I understand that the idea for the amphitheater came up in discussions between the developer and staff. Was there any discussion about what the uses of the amphitheater might be? Any kind of specific ideas about what the amphitheater events would be?
We did not review any kind of programming of the amphitheater. We thought it was really a cool idea and something that wasn't in the area, and it's really a way to accentuate the open space. But if it's something that people don't want because they're fearful of traffic, then that's something we'll have to decide as a group as well.
Yeah, I think the concern is noise. What goes on in the amphitheater, is the noise going to go through this development into our development? I think, at least from our standpoint, that is the big concern is noise. It's a beautiful, on a summer night, you sit out on my deck, it's very quiet, listen to the birds. Amplifiers and rock and roll and that kind of stuff. Just concerned about that. So, okay, I do not have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. May. Mr. Ippolito, any questions?
Just quickly, you just mentioned a football game. Just curious why you mentioned that. Why you would mention parking for a football game.
Yep. One of the things that we discussed earlier in our testimony was that the natatorium will have the ability, through discussions with the school district, to potentially use school district parking lots for events where they could bus people in from the school district parking lot to the natatorium. The point of the high school football game was that they wouldn't do it on the same evening as necessarily a high school football game. They would coordinate with the school district on when their events are, and they'd get a permit with the township.
Gotcha. So I live at 604 Byers Road. I'm not sure if you know where my property is. I live right across from the triangle, and I cross Pickering Creek to get to my house. I'm not sure if you're aware that there's already massive amounts of flooding. The DEP has been to my house numerous times. Aqua uses my driveway. They're now building a new bridge across the driveway. You stated that you had no plans to increase the size of the road and hope that traffic doesn't go down it. Well, what if that fails? What if there is a massive amount of traffic accidents? Are you guys going to then widen the road after the project is over, or?
We'll have our traffic engineer is testifying, I don't know if it's next, but this evening.
Yeah.
And then he'll be able to talk about the meetings that we had with PennDOT and the township and the scoping meetings to kind of go over traffic in the overall area.
Yeah, my concern is if you do have to widen that road, which, I mean, I've seen a million accidents below, above, everywhere around there. You're going to increase the runoff that's going down the road that's coming straight into my driveway.
There is no intention to widen Lionville Station Road.
Right. So again, what's your intent for buying the house at the bottom of the driveway, at the bottom of the triangle?
We were asked by the township as well as the neighbors
Yeah.
to try to purchase that property to straighten out the intersection,
Yeah.
but it had nothing to do with widening Lionville Station Road.
Have you guys been in contact with West Pikeland at all about traffic?
Yes, as a matter of fact, our traffic engineer will talk about it later this evening, that we asked West Pikeland for their traffic engineer to submit a study of the same development and how it impacts them as well as Upper Uwchlan.
Okay, because I mean, my concern is the traffic, but also the runoff. If, if you're not widening it, great. If you widen it, if it has to be widened, that's all coming down the driveway.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that concern. We're not planning on we're not widening it. So I appreciate the concern, but it's not happening.
Okay. So again, in the event that your hopes are we're not going to widen the road, and that's going to deter, I think you mentioned it's going to deter people from going down it. If that doesn't work, what are you guys going to do then? It's just like, hey, fend for yourself, or what?
There's not a hope of widening the road or not widening the road. We are not widening the road. I don't know how else to say it. I apologize. But the road, again, our traffic engineer will talk about one of the things that came out of the June 2025 Planning Commission meetings was that the township came back to us after and said, in order for this project to move forward, we needed to buy the property in the upper left-hand corner in the hopes that Haywood extension would alleviate some of the traffic. And we've found through our traffic study that will in fact help there. In additionally, our traffic engineer will talk about the 55 plus driver profile is different than a typical driver. They don't necessarily leave at the same times of the day. So that also mitigates traffic.
Okay. So there's no anticipation of any extra runoff coming down Lionville Station Road.
Rick, can you discuss how runoff from the property and how we're controlling it?
I heard what he said before. I'm just saying, saying there's no, I'm not concerned about it running to the left or running to the right. It's all ultimately all going down to Pickering Creek.
Mhm.
But I'm saying, do you anticipate any additional water runoff coming down the road more so than there already is?
No, there will be no increase in runoff coming down the road.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Strayhorn? All right, does the board have anything follow up?
No.
Mr. Calgreck, you have any redirect?
Just a couple of comments. I don't know that we need to redirect Mr. Stratton. At the last meeting, I said that we would compile a list of the waivers in one exhibit, and I handed that up earlier. It's Exhibit A40. He's already testified to the need for them. This is just a compilation in one easy-to-find sheet of paper as to what those waivers are. And the second thing I wanted to point out, there was a question earlier about overflow parking at the natatorium, not parking on the community streets. In the draft ordinance, section 511.21, small c, there's a provision that expressly prohibits that from occurring, that overflow parking from the natatorium. I'll read it. No overflow parking shall be permitted on any township or private street within the PRD. It being understood that those attending special events will be directed to an off-site parking area and transported to the natatorium. So we did attempt to cover that in the draft ordinance. Obviously, that might be a policing issue by the HOA or maybe even the police or the township, so people get the message that you can't park there for the overflow natatorium events. But I don't have anything further from Mr. Stratton.
Would you like to go through your exhibits?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because I forget which ones he actually
So
used.
tell me, I think it was 827, 828, 829,
Yes.
and then I don't,
8:30, he testified that he prepared the conceptual stormwater management report. 8:31, he did testify to receipt of the Aqua Will Serve letter. I think that might be it for Mr. Stratton.
do you want to address 840 now, or do you want to?
If the board needs testimony on it, fine. I think it's already been addressed, but I would move.
Just as far as admission.
Yeah, admission. Yeah, let's admit it now.
All right, so 827, 828, 829, 830, 831, and 840.
Yeah.
Any objection or comment from the board?
No.
Any objection or comment from the parties? All right, we'll accept those as exhibits. Okay, you can move on to your next.
All right. Eric Hetzel.
I'm sorry?
No, he hasn't been sworn. State your name and business address for the record, please. Oh, we're going to need the other mic.
Eric Hetzel, ERIKHETZEL, 16 Manor Road, Paoli, Pennsylvania.
And are you employed? And if so, what is your title and what company are you with?
I'm employed by EH Creative Services, a land planning consulting company.
And what's your title?
I'm the principal and owner.
Okay. And Exhibit A35 is a copy of your CV.
Yes,
And are you a certified planner by the American Planning Association, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
I am.
And have you been recognized as an expert witness in land planning by various governing bodies and zoning boards in the context of zoning and land use matters?
Yes,
Are you familiar with the applicant's proposal?
I am.
And you've read the various township reviews from their professional consultants, specifically the emergency service, police, and fire personnel?
I have.
I request that Mr. Hetzel be accepted as an expert in land planning issues.
Does the board have any questions regarding the qualification or credentials?
No.
Do any of the parties have any questions regarding qualification or credentials for Mr. Hetzel? All right, then the board will accept Mr. Hetzel as an expert in land planning.
Mr. Hetzel, you prepared Exhibit A36, which is an emergency services impact study dated June 24, 2026, correct?
I did.
And did you prepare that report with the input of the Uwchlan Township Police, Uwchlan Township Fire Marshal, Lionville Fire Company Station 47, and the Uwchlan Ambulance Corps Station number 87?
I did.
And you've also had the opportunity, I take it, to review letters issued by those various parties or entities, and an email from the Uwchlan Ambulance Corps to Robert Kegel dated March 11, 2026, a copy of which is marked B13, yes?
Yes.
The other letters, reports that I referred to have already been marked as board exhibits. B10, which is the Uwchlan Township, B10 is the Uwchlan Township Fire Marshal report dated July 15. B11 is the Uwchlan Township Police Chief report dated June 30, 2026. And B12 is the Lionville Fire Company report dated July 16, 2026. Those are all board exhibits, but you have reviewed them, correct?
Correct.
I'm not going to get into too much direct Q&A. I'm going to ask you to briefly describe for the board what the purpose of your report was and what your findings were after you spoke with these various individuals and interviewed them as part of your report.
I was asked to speak with the various emergency service providers to ascertain their perspectives on the proposed development in the context of their current operational staffing and capital capacity, and just sort of present my findings along with some recommendations that I pulled from my discussions with them about how this development could be made to be more efficiently serviced by those emergency management service providers.
And is it safe to summarize by saying that your interviews, and I read your report, I'm sure the board has read your report, and you've read the board's exhibits that I just mentioned. Is it safe to say the general theme in all of those reports and in all of those interviews revealed that each department is experiencing funding and staffing strain based on the township's current operational budget and the services that they're being asked to perform?
That's true, yes.
Okay. And can you elaborate on that, what the specific concerns were?
Concerns are mostly centered around this development as being part of more overall incremental growth in the region, as placing a future additional strain on their ability to provide services. It was described as I said, incremental growth not the one single development that would create the need for specific investments, but just that it's one of many pressures that have been building over years.
And the purpose of your report was not to criticize or dispute these various conclusions, but rather to report them to the board and to summarize your findings with respect to those reports, correct?
That's correct.
And you don't dispute the fact that they're, based on these reports, these various entities are experiencing a strain in both budgeting and staffing, correct?
That's correct. I consider the providers to be the experts on understanding their own operational needs.
Your report also did take into account certain physical modifications that might be made to the development plan, setting aside the capital and the funding issues. There were some suggestions, I believe mostly from the fire personnel, maybe emergency services, regarding access to the natatorium, which has already been testified to, and how that can be modified. But there were other site plan modifications that were recommended or that you would recommend to alleviate some of the site development issues, correct?
That's correct.
What were they?
Various things that the professionals identified and that I elaborated a little bit on. One being the ability to continue to review the plans throughout the development approvals process, and to be able to weigh in on certain aspects. There were things like design elements and policy ideas, things like making sure that there's clear address information, street naming, unit identification, and wayfinding throughout the development. That there'd be emergency location markers for things like trails and access to the open space in the stormwater facilities, amphitheater and restroom areas, and other common facilities that are there. They also expressed that it would be helpful to be allowed to review the typical residential building layouts so they could identify patient access concerns before they get there if they need to. Trying to summarize some of the other things. Another thing that was mentioned is resident education about emergency access, the proper use of 911, when it's appropriate to use 911 versus something that may cause for increased calls that don't rise to that level of importance. Things like fraud prevention, that's a big thing that the police have to respond to. Smoke alarm maintenance, these are all education kind of things that they would like to see people who live there understand, how to best treat those types of things. They also talked about event management coordination for the natatorium, the clubhouse, amphitheater, pool, and the other facilities so that there's proper balancing of that. They also noted that they would like to see construction phase emergency access protocols and have the ability to review those for each major phase of the development. And then I think finally, consideration of whether a voluntary emergency services contribution that is tied to initial home sales or other mutually acceptable ways of doing that could assist fire and EMS providers with training, equipment, apparatus, or facility needs.
And you are aware that Mr. Lingo testified previously that he's certainly willing to have those conversations and discuss additional capital contributions with the board should this project be approved as it proceeds from tentative to final plan?
I'm aware of that, yes.
And although our next witness will testify as to this in more detail, you're also aware that this development, setting aside any additional capital contribution, is expected to generate more revenue from the township, which would also help the township better fund these departments if it chooses to do so. That's a choice, obviously, up to the board.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay, I don't have any further questions for Mr. Hetzel.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Hetzel?
I do. I just lost my paper in the ocean here, so might need just a moment. just in response to your last comment about the overall net impact revenue to the township as a result of the development. And I'm sure our next witness will get into this a little bit more, but I understand it was something slightly over the $200,000 range for Uwchlan Township. I'm just curious if you know how much it costs to employ one police officer for 1 year.
I don't have a handle on that. It's probably, once you get equipment benefits and all of that, I would expect the police could probably speak better to that, but it would probably be somewhere in that $100,000 to $200,000 range.
Thank you. And then I noticed just in the summary, you know, as you quoted a little bit, the proposed Rockwell Lionville Preserve development will create additional incremental manageable demand for emergency services in Uwchlan Township. And I'm just wondering how we define manageable demand for the concept of this discussion. Like, what does that mean?
I think it would create demands that are similar to any other typical residential development. This isn't a land use that exhibits any unique characteristics that the township isn't already used to managing or dealing with. I think within the current framework, it doesn't present an excessive demand profile.
Okay, thank you.
So just to follow up on that, you know, our looking specifically at our Uwchlan ambulance and the addition of approximately, let's say, 750, 55 plus residents based on 809 being in the development and 30 of them being open. I do think that places maybe not a unique demand, but it places a heavy demand on the Uwchlan ambulance that a company, I mean, an ambulance corps that's already, you know, had its issues of financial issues, just like all of the ambulance companies are in the area. So do you think that do you still think that's a manageable and typical demand on the Uwchlan ambulance?
I think it is. I mean, I think the ambulance corps could probably speak better to what they perceive the challenges to be, but there's nothing that I see in my experience as a planner that would lead me to believe it's any different than other development that's happening within their service area.
I think some of them are the fiscal impacts. I think I'll hold for the next speaker.
Anyone else from the board?
No.
Mr. Empey? You lost the microphone.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on one of the first topics tonight because I didn't get a chance to speak since then about road salts going into the streams. As we all know, salt cannot be, it can only really be diluted. It's dissolved, so it can't be filtered out. There's a direct relationship between road slopes and salt used because of the, making roads drivable during the winter. Has there been a study with topo maps in 3D, and have you established which roads have certain slopes, max slope of 7%, et cetera, grade?
I guess we'll let this witness can't obviously address those questions. And I'll let Mr. Stratton embellish, but I don't think road grades yet have been established. This is really accurately described as a sketch plan, which hasn't been fully engineered.
Okay. Once fully engineered, if there are issues like that, are you open to changing the sketch plan?
Absolutely. I mean, we will take a look at road grades, and we understand the concern loud and clear about keeping salt out of the waterways and away from sensitive areas.
Thank you.
Ms. Widener, again, we're dealing with the fiscal issues related to the emergency services.
Not an excessive demand profile, is that what I heard?
That's what I said, yes.
Okay, I'm reading from the exhibit that Uwchlan Ambulance Corps Chief of Operations estimated the proposed development would generate more than 200 additional EMS calls per year. This is a significant figure that warrants the board's attention. Cardiac arrests, critical lift assists, and backup coverage from this 55-plus age-qualified community. Are you standing by your statement that this is not an excessive demand profile?
I don't believe it's excessive compared to the rest of the land use in the township. I think it's consistent.
Okay, the report also states that this is not an indictment of Lionville Preserve as a proposal, but rather that the board look at the overall growth that this area is confronting, and that this is one aspect of it. And so my question for the board is, if we're looking at overall growth, how do we handle something of this density when we know more development is coming down the pike?
Okay, so the board is not
Oh,
they're not giving testimony right now.
oh, okay.
The applicant's witness is providing testimony.
What is your request for a contribution from the fire company? What is the fire company says in here they want $450,000. Are you willing to pay that for 1 year? They want this as a one-time payment of $450,000?
I can answer that question. No, not a one-time payment of $450,000. What we'd said, it's very difficult to, at this stage of the proceedings, if there is going to be a voluntary capital contribution to the project, you first need to know what the project is, what is approved. There are other costs involved, and then you back into what the availability is for additional capital contributions. And Mr. Babbitt, our next witness, can actually testify to some of the numbers, the fiscal impact. But at this stage of the game, it would be speculative at best. But yeah, I seriously doubt that there would be. But it's up to the board. I mean, it's up to the board. If there is a capital contribution, we would not be the party that determines where that money goes. That would be up to the Board of Supervisors to dispense that however they saw fit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Engel?
I would like to circle back to your comment of excessive use. When you said that it's comparable to other land uses within the township, does that mean this development and its usage compares the same to another development and its usage? Is that what you mean by that?
What I mean is I don't think this is unique in the overall community framework of the township. I think there's nothing that's so unique or different about this that it would create a different type of a demand than the rest of the township currently experiences.
Right, but do you agree that there would be a cumulative, like, it's like, okay, so, some other development, my development has the same percentage of calls. So this development has the same percentage of calls, but it's still cumulatively more calls because it's an additional development in the area.
I would agree, yes.
Okay, and if the additional development costs between an extra $200,000 and $300,000 per year, that would be something that would be borne by the township unless another agreement is struck. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, and I think the fiscal impacts that will be spoken to will demonstrate that that there are taxes that are collected with new development as well, and other revenues that are generated.
Great. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Ms. Matthews? Again, we're focused now on emergency services impact.
For the emergency services, I'm a little confused. It was mentioned there'd be 4 large events at the aquatic center, which would probably need maybe more emergency services those 4 times. But then it was mentioned that there'd be possibly 7 to 9 medium events, which would again probably require emergency services being on site or near, ready for call. That comes to 1 event per month. Are the emergency services able to handle this?
That's really a question for the emergency services professionals. They've already, and I've described in my report, they've already described some strain that is on their budgets and capital and staffing that I believe would need to be addressed, whether or not this development goes in or not. So I think, yes, there's no question there will be additional need for services generated by this development.
And you're aware at the present time, they have an ambulance sitting on Whitford Road, or not Whitford, Front Road, to be able to service other areas because of the congestion in the 113, 100 area.
Again, that is an existing condition in the township today that is a reality of the area.
Thank you.
Ms. Dwyer? Mr. Siegel or Miss Siegel? Mr. Martin?
Not at this time. My questions were asked by other participants.
And Mr. McLaughlin not here? Mr. Chadsey? Mr. Fertel? Mr. Denny? Ms. Blatcher?
I'm taller. Can you tell me whether or not other municipalities who also share these services have been taken into consideration and the impact there? Because while I appreciate that this development is going into Uwchlan, it's going to dramatically impact neighboring townships.
I did not talk to any surrounding municipalities.
Okay, that might be a good idea, because while the existing conditions are what they are, and based on what I've heard tonight, they're doing their best and they're stretched very thin. Adding a community of 55 and over, and then saying that they're not going to have an increased risk or an increased likelihood of needing those services isn't realistic. If you have a neighborhood of 400 and whatever units and you have a mixed population, you're not going to have the same incidence of or need for emergency services. So I'd urge that other municipalities and the impact be considered, because it's not isolated.
We appreciate that. And for the traffic study, we did include the other neighboring townships. For the emergency services, we met with the emergency service providers and got an understanding from them of what townships they service. So for instance, one of them services Uwchlan, Upper Uwchlan, 5/6 of West Vincent, West Pikeland, Charlestown, Wallace Township. Another of them services Uwchlan, but they have a substation in Upper Uwchlan. So we have met with them in attempt to get a better understanding of kind of what their global needs are and what their services are. And we're comfortable continuing to work with them to limit the impact of this community on everyone.
And I appreciate that. I have nothing but the greatest respect for the first responders, but I do have significant concerns. And being here on behalf of West Pikeland Township, which is about half a block from where this development's going in, I do think that it needs to be considered as part of the development and not just put it on the emergency services to guess what they're going to need once this development is put in place.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Lager? Ms. May? Mr. Ippolito? And Ms. Strayhorn? Mr. Cagle, do any of the township staff or consultants have any comments or questions regarding this matter?
Thank you. For the record, my name's James Fisher, Fisher. Just a couple questions. I think you made this clear, but you expect the calls for service to be comparable with similar homes within the township as far as the numbers?
I wouldn't expect it to be different, no.
Okay. Did you do any work-based analysis on the impact for the emergency services?
Any what based on it?
Workload-based analysis?
No, I did not.
Okay, would it surprise you if you did one, if it said it would account for at least one police officer, if not more, as far as workload?
No, I think I did mention that that there might be some staffing needs, but I didn't have a way of measuring it.
Okay, and would it surprise you as far as salary and benefits for a police officer in 2027, it would probably be somewhere between $230,000 and $250,000?
That doesn't surprise me, no.
Okay, I have no further question.
Any of the emergency responders that are here? No. Board, any other question?
I have one follow-up question. Again, going back to the conclusion of the report, it says the interview identified practical and credible concerns that should be addressed through final plan design, approval conditions, emergency service coordination, and HOA responsibilities, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine is lending itself to something like an annual ambulance contribution or subscription and a fire capital contribution. Is that what you mean by HOA responsibility?
I think it could be that. I think what I really meant was that the HOA should be, one thing that was mentioned, responsible for effectively keeping access ways free and clear, clearing snow, making sure all that. But I think any responsibilities the HOA could assist in facilitating emergency service provision is something that is worthy of discussion.
And as far as the questions regarding something like a capital contribution to the Lionville Fire Company, you had identified through this study that one of the primary issues facing the fire service is the decline of volunteerism and their issues recruiting and having reliable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week volunteers that are prepared to respond. Is there anything that capital contribution does to ensure that bodies are ready to be on fire trucks? I mean, we can buy 30 fire trucks, but if there's no one to drive them, it's a concern. So I'm just not sure if there's anything in here that speaks to how the volunteerism issue could be addressed.
Again, I think that's a township decision, how they want to use that money. It's my understanding that there have been pressures. There's declining volunteerism, yes, in the volunteer fire company. And that's kind of a universal thing that I hear, and it's been reported everywhere that volunteerism in general is down in many pursuits. It was conveyed to me that the fire company has been considering the need to have a professional staffed, department, or at least at very least hybrid with some professionals. Again, that's really a township policy decision in conjunction with the emergency services providers, how best to do that and how best to position that funding to achieve it.
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, just if, based on 55 and over for the 90% of the development, do you agree that it would, or would you think it is harder or easier to find volunteers or professional staff that would be willing to work at the fire station if the development was not 55 and over, if it was all standard?
Could you repeat the?
Would you think it would be easier or harder to identify volunteers for the fire department if it was not a 55 plus restriction?
I don't know that really has a bearing on it. I think
You think
volunteerism.
it'd be easier to find volunteers who are 55 and over?
I don't know that. I'm not sure where you're drawing volunteers from generally anyway. And I know plenty of people in that age category. I'm about to turn 56. I consider myself to be pretty active, and I know people who are older than me that are operating as volunteers in their fire companies. I think the harder thing is just finding people in the younger end of the spectrum. This is anecdotal, but what I've heard is it's younger people have more demands on a lot of their time and professional needs, and there just tends to be fewer younger people joining the volunteer ranks.
And just one last question. Through the course of the testimony over the last 3 nights or 2 weeks, we've heard a lot about some of the expenses that are going to be created as a result of the management of the property, the conservation easement, common space, all the things that are going to go into the HOA assessments and any other mechanisms that will be used to pay for what's happening on that site. Do you think it's a fair assessment to say that given the enormity of the crisis facing our fire and EMS, that the taxpayers of Uwchlan Township are generally going to be responsible for addressing that, as opposed to the residents on site?
Well, this community, this development will contain new taxpayers as well. It's not just the existing taxpayers that will be footing the bill, it's the new taxpayers as well. And I think Mr. Babbitt will testify to the fiscal details of it.
Right. So that will come out of the township's general budget or dedicated emergency services funds that are funded by taxes, as opposed to an HOA assessment. There's a significant portion of this, I guess I'm asking if you agree, that is going to be funded through the township versus an on-site mechanism.
The township, as I understand it, has a fire tax. But so these new residents would be paying that. But we have talked about the concept of at property transfer, funds being utilized or collected at transfer for emergency services. So that's something we still need to work out.
And if I could just follow up, I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think also what my colleague is perhaps suggesting is that there's certainly going to be revenue generated from this new development that will go into the general fund of the township, which we will use at our discretion for township matters, EMS, so forth. But are there going to be dedicated funds that will be earmarked for the HOA that are specifically going to be, or I'm sorry, expenditures that are specifically going to be take the responsibility of the HOA that will be within the HOA bylaws? So for example, you've already stated that landscaping, snow removal and so forth will be taken care of by the HOA. Are there things that can be dedicated so that it will not be the responsibility of the township to pay for them?
Yep. So said another way by us, we're totally open to having a fee from the neighbors. We have to be sensitive to what that is. They'll also be taxpayers. And although this is not a group that is necessarily, it's not affordable housing, the majority of these folks will be past their prime earning years and they will have budgets to work with as well. So we don't want to price them out necessarily as a result of additional fees, nor do we want to put additional costs on the township. The fiscal study is going to talk to the money that's going to be coming into the township, and it's beyond just the fiscal study you've seen that shows the annual surplus. There are other monies that come from this community.
Any follow-up, Mr. Calgary?
No,
Exhibits?
I think it was just his CV, which is A35, and his emergency services impact study, A36.
Any objections from the board? Any objections from the parties about the entry of those exhibits? All right, board will accept those exhibits.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. Next witness is David Babbitt.
I do.
Please state your name and business address for the record.
I'm David C. Babbitt, David C. Babbitt and Associates, LLC, P.O. Box 922, Fraser, F-R-A-Z-E-R, Pennsylvania 19355.
And Exhibit A39 is a copy of your CV.
I don't know what the exhibit number is, but yes, that I imagine it is.
And are you a certified planner in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
I am, but I think my certification will probably lapse by the end of this year because I am in the process of retiring.
Maybe you can move into the community.
We are actually looking at a different age-qualified community in the area, yes.
Okay. You've been accepted as an expert in fiscal planning and analysis in many other municipalities in southeastern Pennsylvania during your career. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
I could go through his credentials, but I would ask that the board accept Mr. Babbitt as an expert in fiscal planning.
Board have any questions about Mr. Babbitt's credentials?
No.
Any parties with any questions about Mr. Babbitt's credentials? All right, the board will accept Mr. Babbitt as an expert in financial planning?
Yep.
Fiscal analysis. Yes,
Fiscal
thank you.
analysis.
Fiscal analysis.
Mr. Babbitt, we've marked two exhibits, and I know you don't know what the exact exhibit marking number is, but if I were to tell you that the first exhibit that you prepared and which we placed in our exhibit list is a report that you prepared dated June 12, 2025, which is marked as Exhibit A37. You prepared that report, correct?
Yes.
And that was based on a prior iteration, probably 3 prior iterations of the plan that we're now testifying here on tonight, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So when we submitted the current plan, the June plan we've been calling it, we also attached to that submission Exhibit A38, which is your most recent analysis dated May 31, 2026, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's that report that you will be testifying from or referring to as needed tonight, correct?
Yes, indeed.
All right. So I'm going to let you free flow here a little bit since you've done this many, many times over many, many decades. Can you please give the board your executive summary, I'll say, of your study and its findings?
Certainly. The township spreadsheet is the second to the last page of this document. I would suggest that we concentrate on the big spreadsheet. There are 3 what I call panels on this spreadsheet. The first panel discusses the number of units in square feet of each of the uses, the market value and the assessed value per unit or per square foot. And then the total assessed value comes to a projected $142 million. As such, it represents a significant proportion. Yes, it represents 8.4% of the total assessed value of all properties in the township, at least as of earlier this year. It is, again, a significant development. Continuing in that top panel, we have the residents per unit and workers per 1,000 square feet. These are from studies of the northeastern United States, specifically for age-qualified developments. The 3.50, is specifically for standard single-family detached developments, 4 bedrooms each in Pennsylvania. The total number of residents is projected to be 809. The total number of workers, that includes full and part-time, is projected to be 93. To determine the township expenditures, there is a multi-layered analysis involved here I would suggest that you look at the bottom of the page and under the notes. The township has 5 operating funds totaling about $15.3 million. That would be in cell D31. We are looking at only operating funds because other funds that have to do with, say, open space or with capital expenditures are not regular ongoing expenditures as we would see in the operating expenditures. So the $15.3 million is what the township spends this year from the current budget on its operating expenditures. There are some pass-through funds, mostly from things like state subsidies, totaling $1,920,000, which then gives us $13,357,000 in net expenditures. Of that, about a third or so would represent the expenditures that the township makes every year that are oriented towards non-residential development, and about 2/3 of the township expenditures are applicable to residential development. So the $9 million or so for residential development then is divided by the township population from the most recent census study, not the decennial census, but the American Community Survey of 2024, 19,394 residents, gives us a per capita multiplier, an annual cost per person in the township for these operating expenditures of just shy of $465. That is applied to the 105 residents of the standard single-family detached dwellings, giving us about $48,000 in expenditures for that dwelling type. We all know intuitively that residents of age-qualified developments generate lower township expenditures than residents of standard development. Obviously, there are fewer people, there are no kids, people drive less often, they particularly drive less often during rush hour. There will be less in the way of recreation needs for the township, all kinds of elements that result in the reduction of township expenditures for residents of age-qualified developments. That series of calculations subtracts about 1/3 or so from that $465 per person, giving us the age-qualified town per capita expenditure of just shy of $299. That would be in cell D38. That figure is applied to the number of residents in the age-qualified development. Finally, the expenditures for the natatorium are using the proportional valuation method based on the assessed value projected to be about $8.1 million. And that's based on the proportion of the township's expenditures that are currently attributable to existing non-residential development as modified by a refinement coefficient. So all told, the township expenditures are projected to be just shy of $292,000 per year. The expenditures per unit or per 1,000 square feet are in column H. The middle panel discusses the revenue. We'll go at these one at a time. The real estate tax is simply the assessed value multiplied times the township's tax rate, which totals 1.025 mils, which is a conglomeration of all of the 5 operating expenditure funds, includes the fire fund, the EMS fund, the general fund, so forth. That represents about $138,000 in expenditures, and you will note that there is a 0 under the natatorium because we are assuming that the natatorium is going to be a tax-exempt property. Will generate 0 in real estate tax. The next category is the earned income tax revenue, and that is based on the value of the homes and the Freddie Mac, or excuse me, the Fannie Mae criteria that no more than 28% of a household's income can be used for housing costs, which include the mortgage, homeowners association fees, insurance, and taxes. Those calculations provide us with projections on the minimum level of household income necessary to afford units that are costing what these projected units will cost. That number is then multiplied by the township's tax rate of 0.5%, and then that gives us the $54,000 or so for the standard units. For the age-qualified units, as a result of comments made by Mr. Comita and his associates, we've reduced the earned income tax revenue from the age-qualified development. My original studies had it at 50% of what a normal household would generate. Now it's down to 25%. I don't necessarily agree with that change, but we've shown it anyway in order to show what I would consider to be the worst case scenario. There is a couple of dollars, $3,700 or so in earned income tax revenue from the workers at the natatorium. The township will collect all of the earned income tax revenue from all of the workers, but will send a majority of that money back to the municipalities where these workers live. If the workers happen to live in the township, then obviously Uwchlan Township will keep all of that money, but I would suggest that that is because by virtue of the fact of the residents, the place where the residents live being the township as opposed to the place where they work. In other words, if they live in the township, it doesn't matter where they work, the township will get that money, the one exception being the city of Philadelphia. The real earned income tax revenue, rather, is projected to total about $210,000 a year. Again, I think that is an extremely low projection, and it's likely to be much higher. And that does not include the open space fund earned income tax, that's 0.25%, which will generate an additional $103,000 each year for the open space fund. The next column is the real estate transfer tax, which is simply the number of units in each category multiplied the turnover rates, 4% for single family detached, only 7% for carriage homes. Originally we had 10%. We were asked to reduce that. Again, I don't necessarily agree with that change. I think that families that move into age-qualified developments can't do so until they're over the age of 55, and typically they do not stay more than 10 or 15 years, and therefore the turnover rate is going to be higher in an age-qualified development than what you would see in a standard open market development. Nonetheless, we have reduced the real estate transfer tax accordingly, and that comes to about $102,000 per year. I will make note of the very bottom line of the spreadsheet, line 40, that the real estate transfer tax is the annual ongoing revenue to the township after the development is completed. The real estate transfer tax during the completion of the development, that's the initial sales of the units, will generate $2,199,000 to each of the township and the school district, which is not included in this spreadsheet, but I would argue can be used for capital expenditures. So when the fire company says it wants a new fire engine or a new ladder truck, that can easily come out of this $2.2 million sum, which will accrue to the township over the build-out period, which is likely to be, what, 6 or 8 years, something in that ballpark? Right. So it's not all going to be, he said not necessarily 6 or 8 years from today. It's going to take place over time. It's not going to be a lump sum payment. There are municipalities that are sophisticated enough to earmark the real estate transfer tax revenue off the initial sales of units being built in the municipalities for capital purposes. Once that home gets built and sold the first time, any other real estate transfer tax revenue would be a regular ongoing revenue source and therefore not a capital revenue source. So again, the real estate transfer tax revenue that is not counted in this analysis, the upfront overall real estate transfer tax revenue is $2.2 million, which I would suggest covers an awful lot of capital needs. The next column is actually two things there, and one is the liquid fuels revenue. This is a subsidy from PennDOT, $17 point and change per capita, multiplied times the number of persons. The local services taxes, the townships, I believe it's the $52 per worker, per year tax that is paid by any worker, including part-time workers, as long as they earn a minimum of, I believe, $12,500, which would be the majority of them. That will net the township about $4,300. Overall, liquid fuels and local services tax revenue is just shy of $19,000 per year. Miscellaneous revenue is mostly from franchise fee, and it's based on what the township now collects on a per unit basis for that revenue source. And that's also a small amount of revenue from the natatorium. We're assuming that the natatorium will generate the same miscellaneous revenue, franchise fee revenue as about 6 or 7 homes in the township because of its size. There's also interest earnings totaling about $9,850. That is simply because the most residents, most homeowners, most businesses pay the property tax, the real estate tax at one time of year, and then the township banks that money, puts it into an interest-bearing account, and that represents the interest earnings here. The total annual revenue for the entire development is projected to be just shy of $506,000. That's the total revenue, not the net revenue. The net revenue, which is the third panel, is the total revenue of $506,000 minus the township expenditures of $292,000, and that's where we get the $214,000 per year. That's the annual projected surplus to the township, not the total revenue. Again, that does not include the $2.2 million from the real estate transfer tax revenue off the initial sales, and it does not include about $103,000 per year from the open space tax. So that is the township impact. I'd be happy to move on to the school district impact if you like, or skip it if you like. No preference?
I would skip it.
I'm sorry? Skip it.
I would skip it, but I'm just
Okay.
a little.
Instead of a full analysis, could you just give like a high level comparison of how the township's revenues compare to the Downingtown Area School District?
Well, the difference here is that an age-qualified development does not typically have school-age children who need to be taught in the local school district. Because of comments made from Mr. Comita and his associates, we've now projected 21 public school students coming out of the age-qualified development. I've honestly never seen that happen, not on an ongoing regular basis, but nonetheless, we've thrown it in there. The overall, the vast majority of the units will not have school kids. Therefore, every penny of revenue coming into the school district becomes surplus. And just the real estate tax alone is going to be just shy of $4.3 million. The school district's tax rate is 33 mils compared to the township's tax rate of just over 1 mil. So it's a very significant difference in the real estate tax. There's also going to be some earned income tax revenue, again, some real estate transfer tax revenue, some state and federal revenue and local services tax that goes to the school district, and finally earnings on investments. The total annual revenue to the school district is $4,910,000, giving us the net revenue, this annual surplus of about $3.9 million. Most of that's for the two reasons, as I mentioned, because the school district's tax rate is much higher and because there are very few school-age kids and therefore very low expenditures for the school district. And at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Can I ask you a question? Because you said a couple of times that you prepared this report, right?
I did.
And it was submitted by Rockwell with your name on it here. But you disputed some of the numbers in the report. I mean, how am I supposed to interpret that?
I'm not sure I understand your
So
question.
you said for the earned income taxes, it's estimated your annual township revenue from earned income tax will be $210,483, but then you said it's likely to be much higher. And then real estate transfer tax, you said it would be $102,360. And then you said, well, I don't believe that number. It's going to be higher. And so, what number are you want me to consider, and what number do you want me to dismiss?
Well, the real estate transfer tax number, I think, is going to be pretty accurate, but it doesn't include the initial sales of the real estate transfer.
No, that's not what you said.
It's the earned income tax revenue that I have a difference with, and I think it's going to be significantly higher than that.
Okay.
Again, I'm presenting the worst case scenario here.
Okay.
And even under the worst case scenario, the development still generates sufficient funds to cover its own costs and to subsidize the township to the tune of about $214,000 a year, which the township can use anyway it sees fit.
Well, then I'm going to consider the numbers that you submitted as, you're calling it a worst case scenario. I'm consider that the numbers that you're standing by
Certainly.
and that were submitted as, they're going to be submitted as evidence. Okay. So just wanted to be clear, because when you give it testimony, you say that's disputing numbers that you're submitting as is just confusing how I'm supposed to handle that information. So
I think you take the numbers on the page
Okay,
and,
that's what I'll do.
and again, understand that these are, worst case scenario for the township.
Okay.
And even in the worst case scenario, there's plenty of money.
So, do you mind if I ask?
Please do.
Okay. So the overall annual net township revenue is estimated to be around $214,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Discussed this with the previous person as well. As we discussed with the previous testimony, and as the chief mentioned, a single police officer is going to cost around $250,000 to add to staff. And while, and that would be probably due just to the addition of people with the additional call volume that we would receive from it, we would probably need another person. Now, logistically, in a police department, adding one police officer when you have it's not easily just to add one person and make their shifts all work. So we'd probably have to add more or take part-time or something. We'd have to fiddle with it. So it might wind up being much more than that. The ambulance report estimates that they're going to be around $100,000 to $200,000 gap between what their increased revenue is and what their increased services are. And the fire department is a little less clear, but suggested $450,000 one time. That gives you some kind of estimate of what they're thinking over a 15-year period, probably. So with that, why was those numbers, or at least an estimate of those numbers, not also considered in the fiscal impact?
Because the fiscal impact is based on a per capita analysis. We simply take what the township currently spends on a per capita basis and multiply that times the new residents. It's a little bit different for the age qualified residents versus the standard development residents, but still it's a per capita multiplier methodology. What you're describing may be a case study method where we simply ask each service provider, the recreation department, the police chief, the fire chief, the public works, and so forth, what they would need in terms of money every year to accommodate a development of this size, and that becomes the expenditure side. The revenue side, again, would be different. But that's not what's called for, and it's not what we've done.
Okay.
Also, I think worth mentioning is that there are numerous municipal expenditures. I shouldn't say that. There are expenditures that would typically be municipal expenditures that will not occur with this development, in particular, public works expenditures, because these streets are proposed to be privately owned and maintained. That's a significant expenditure every year that the township will not have to make.
Okay. And I understand, I'm not criticizing the report. I understand that there's a methodology. But given that, so when you're taken together, just back of the envelope, would you agree police, ambulance, fire, we're talking maybe $400,000 to $500,000 a year based on the numbers that I said earlier?
That is entirely possible, yes.
And so based on, if you take the annual net township revenue of around $214,000, you're looking at actually a deficit when you add those two deficits, around $200,000 to $300,000.
No, sir. I will point out that if the township needs, say, $500,000 every year to accommodate this development, that comes out of not the net revenue, but the total revenue, which is more than $500,000 a year. That's why I say there's money available for virtually every activity the township wishes to engage in. It's not the net revenue that's the surplus, it's the total revenue. There's going to be, we project, almost $506,000 per year.
Okay, you said the annual net township revenue, and then you said that's your surplus.
Yes, that's the surplus. It's after subtracting expenditures.
Right, and I'm adding in these additional expenditures.
But I think you're adding them in after you've already taken out, the revenue or the expenditures for those. In other words.
You think I'm double counting?
Yes. In other words, yes.
Okay, but this is additional police officer that's not in the I'm saying that there's an additional police officer that's not in your calculation, that there's an additional contribution that we will need to cover in one way or another for the ambulance of around $200,000, give or take, that's not into your original calculation. And then whatever the fire is, maybe $50,000, whatever, get round numbers. That was not in the expenditures that was in your analysis.
Well, there are police expenditures, ambulance expenditures, and fire expenditures in the projected expenditures on the top panel of 292,000 or so. They're in there already. So I don't think you can say that the township is going to have these expenditures, which are already counted, and then they're going to have additional expenditures, which then have to be counted.
So when you did can you clarify that when you calculated what the police contribution to the expenditures were, did you adjust for the fact that we'd be adding a police officer?
It essentially, yes, if necessary. I mean, again, whatever the township spends on a per capita basis for police today, we're assuming that that's going to be the same for the future residents. Again, slightly different for the age qualified residents. So it's built into the analysis. Yes.
Okay. I don't think it's fully built in, but we can agree to disagree on it.
Okay.
I'll let that pass. So with $210,000, compared to $214,000 revenue compared to the school district's $3.9 million. Okay, so I think they're wildly different benefits for this.
They certainly are.
Just from amateur's eye, do you agree with me that it looks like from the township's perspective, the standard single family detached on a per unit basis is much better from a net revenue than the age qualified?
Do you mean for the township or for the school district?
For the township.
So the township, respectfully, no, it would not be. If you look at cell D23, revenue exceeds expenditures annually for the single family standard detached dwellings by 57.7%, but for the age qualified detached by 92.8%, and for the age qualified carriage homes by 124.3%.
Well, I'm looking at the annual net revenue per unit on column C.
It's on a per unit revenue, but it's
Well,
as a percentage.
Percentages. I can only spend dollars. I'm sorry. So I apologize. Didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm looking at column C because I can't spend percentages, I spend dollars. And it appears to me, and then please correct me if I'm misreading this, that on a per unit basis, the standard single family detached is a net revenue, annual net revenue per unit of $939.
Yes, that's correct.
The average net township revenue for an age qualified single family detached is $435, and an average net township revenue for the age qualified carriage homes is $516. Is it my understanding that the annual net township per unit is substantially higher, almost twice as much or more for the standards units than for the age qualified?
That's correct on a dollar for dollar basis, but not on a percentage basis.
Yeah.
And most of that difference, by the way, is simply because of the higher market value of the single family detached dwelling, standard open market dwellings.
Okay. Is there a difference in the style or any kind of building standards for the single family standard detached versus the age qualified standard detached?
I'm sorry, I don't
Do
understand.
they look the same? What is the material difference that's changing the market value of those two units?
Well, the biggest thing would be that the standard open market units would be larger. They're going to have 4 bedrooms. The age qualified single homes are probably not going to have 4 bedrooms. They don't need 4 bedrooms. They don't have school kids, by and large. They would be significantly larger, more expensive, more valuable units, probably also on larger lots.
So, however, if this it appears to me from the analysis that if we were doing a standard single-family detached with standard carriage homes as two different units, that there would be a better impact for the township based on an understanding there might be an adjustment for market value and things like that. You're right that the percentages, but just from gross on annual net township revenue, it appears to me that it would be more favorable for the township.
Again, on a dollar basis, yes. On a percentage basis, no.
Okay. That's all for now.
Yeah. I have a couple, just some clarifications that I was seeking. You were here for the testimony regarding the emergency services impact right before you.
Just this evening, yes, I was,
Yeah.
yes.
So I'm trying to sort out because I feel like I've heard two different things. In the impact report regarding the EMS, fire, and police, Chief Johnson from the Uwchlan ambulance mentioned in his interview that a lot of the 55+ residents were still very active. I think Mr. Hetzel had suggested some of them might become volunteer firefighters at some point. But in your testimony, you mentioned that 55+ and age qualified development residents are generally not driving as much and are not having as much impact on the neighborhood around them. And so from my perspective, are we talking about a community that is less active or that is just as active as anyone else? You know, I feel like we're hearing conflicting stories at the same time.
Well,
So how would you respond?
I would suggest that typically residents of age-qualified developments are slightly less active than residents of standard developments. They're obviously older. Many of them work. Many of them do not work. Mr. Ostomchuk, I'm sure, will tell you that the traffic generation is significantly lower for age-qualified development, even if the dwelling types are held constant, single homes versus single homes. There are going to be, there's no need for school buses, for example, in an age-qualified development. Typically, there are no school kids. There's simply going to be, less traffic, less need for certain municipal services, such as recreation. Again, because there's on-site recreation and there's no kids. The needs for the police would be lower on a per capita basis. The needs for fire would be lower on a per capita basis. Interestingly, the expenditures for EMS will be slightly higher because older folks tend to require EMS services on a per capita basis slightly higher than that of standard open market units. So all of that's been taken into account.
And as far as the term age qualified development, obviously not a fiscal impact analysis or a spreadsheet person, so I'll lend to your expertise. Does age qualified development, is that specific to 55+? Are there other categories within age qualified development, or is it just any type of development that has any type of age restriction on it?
My understanding of an age-qualified development is that there are two elements. One is that there has to be at least one resident of each unit above the age of 55. Not every resident, but at least one. And there can be no resident under the age of 18. And that is why we reached the conclusion that there will be no or almost no school-age children. It is possible that there may be an 18 or 19 or 20-year-old young person who is perhaps has a disability and will continue in a school district being educated because of that disability. We had that in our household. One of our kids was almost 20 when he graduated, but that's an exceptional circumstance that is not a typical situation by any means.
Okay, and then just another clarification that I'm just kind of seeing a discrepancy between testimony. In your report, you indicated the minimum annual household income necessary to pay for the real estate taxes, insurance, HOA fees, and mortgage is projected to be $361,577 for the standard single-family homes, $271,532 for the age-qualified single-family homes, and $242,790 for the age-qualified carriage homes. I think Mr. Lingo had testified that these are residents that are on a budget, and we've kind of been mindful of cutting costs to them because of their age restriction. But this seems like a contradiction to that statement.
Well, these units are, they're not on the low end of the spectrum of value by any means. And most of the time, new units are not on the low end of the spectrum of value. As I like to say to the classes that we teach, if you show me a developer who's building houses that are cheaper than all of the other homes in an area, I will show you a developer that's likely to go out of business very soon. Most new development has higher value than the existing development that could be on the other side of a fence or on the other side of a street. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, but by and large, that is generally true.
And just revisiting that same statement where we referenced the HOA fees. I don't think you were here, but earlier in the hearing, I had asked some questions regarding some of the common fees that residents were going to be facing that were rolled into their HOA. Stormwater infrastructure maintenance, upkeep, both on an annual and capital basis, trail maintenance, road maintenance, all of that. And so I'm wondering, to get this estimate for the $361,000 or the $271,000 annual household income, what do you estimate the HOA fees to be?
I believe that's at the bottom of page 5. The HOA fees are projected to be $200 per month per unit, which is rather moderate. Yes, it is.
Is there an additional mechanism? I'm sorry, if we can just keep it quiet. Is there an additional mechanism?
Hold on a sec. Can we not have any comments from the audience while we're testifying? Okay.
Thank you. Is there an additional mechanism that the developer intends to use to finance the costs that will be forwarded on to the residents?
One item that we have done previously in some other Chester County developments that we are looking to utilize here is a neighborhood improvement district, which is essentially a special taxing district. And in those cases, public improvements can be financed through a bond that the homeowners will pay, essentially another tax that live here. So they'll have their township tax, school tax, county tax, and then they'd also have a neighborhood tax.
And if you implemented a neighborhood improvement district in conjunction with this PRD, would that financial amount be included in the $200 of the HOA fees, or would that be an additional amount?
That would be an additional amount.
Do you have an estimate of what the additional amount or what the total burden to the HOA per residence would be?
Yeah, we think we're going to be in the $500 a month range.
Just so I'm clear, it's 500 total, 200 plus 300?
Approximately,
Okay.
and that may change one way, but
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
again, we don't know what's approved here, so we're really speculating.
I was just as the estimate, I just didn't know if that was just 500 for the NID or if that.
Understood.
That's just 200 plus 300.
Correct.
Okay.
And you feel that the $500 per housing unit, or however it's distributed, is going to be enough to properly finance and prepare for the costs associated with the stormwater, the trails, and all the other common maintenance and expenditures that will be generated within the
So
development?
from a process standpoint, after we have an idea on the density of the community and the product mix, meaning number of single-family homes, size lots, open space calculations, we would then go to a property management company to give us an estimate for the maintenance. We're going to work with French and Pickering Creeks to also determine what the cost of that maintenance will be on an annual, and we'll roll that up into a budget. And then the homeowners association will be set up in such a way that it will be able to fund whatever maintenance obligations it has.
Would the implementation of the neighborhood improvement district be required to finance all the expenditures on site?
We need that as part of this project, yes.
And do you know how much of the expenses associated with, for example, the stormwater infrastructure upkeep? Do you have ballpark figures of what that might look like for the HOA?
We don't have a breakdown of any because we haven't designed the stormwater management yet. So that would be something that after this stage, we would then get into engineering the plans and getting a better idea on things like that.
The reason I ask is because in the event that the infrastructure is not properly maintained or has failures and funds do not exist within the neighborhood improvement district or the HOA funds, the township then has a responsibility to step in to mitigate that. And so I'm just wondering if you can estimate what that potential number might look like so that the township could factor it into.
We estimate $0 contributed by the township to maintain this community in terms of stormwater management and the
Right.
other obligations of the homeowners association.
But in the event that the stormwater infrastructure fails, the township is responsible for stepping in to mitigate that in the absence of HOA management. And so you can disagree with me if you don't think it's accurate, but the township still does have to be mindful of the cost of the infrastructure on site because they potentially have a responsibility to step in if it's not maintained properly.
To answer your question from a legal perspective, the municipality's planning code dealing with Article 7 PRDs does allow the township to lien properties, all of the residential properties, if that eventuality occurs, which you just said. So it's not as though the township is remediless. You may have to advance the funds because God only knows how long that lien process would take. But the act specifically does give the township the remedy to recoup those funds and lien individual properties.
And so if we're looking at a $500 expense to the residents within this community, and you just testified, correct me if I'm incorrect, that the neighborhood improvement district would be a necessary part to keep these finances. Is it correct that under neighborhood improvement development districts, the HOA actually has an opportunity to dissolve the neighborhood improvement district with a 40% vote?
Lou will be able to answer that specific question, but I do want to drop back that the neighborhood improvement district funds are not for ongoing maintenance. There's a bond for infrastructure improvements for the public good. And then that bond is backed by the homeowners association. So, and that's the fee, but I'll let Lou answer your question.
Yeah, the NID, Neighborhood Improvement District, and our office was instrumental in formation of the NID for the Drahian Estate in West Goshen Township, which presently operates under a NID. It's a totally different entity than the HOA. The HOA really has nothing to do with the NID. It's a separate corporate entity. And in fact, the township has members on the NID board. It's really an interesting, I mean, I don't mean to waste everybody's time getting into maybe interesting just to lawyers, but it is an interesting way to finance some capital improvements for projects. But the HOA really has nothing to do with commingling NID finances.
It was really just for the purpose of estimating what the total financial impact to the resident would be. So I didn't mean to confuse the two, but collectively.
The benefit of the NID from the municipal perspective is and when if you're worried about the other residents of the township having to fork over money to help, pay for this development, is the NID essentially allows the township to establish a special district where only the residents of that subdivision pay the surcharge, the NID fee, in addition to their HOA fee. So it's, I can't speak to Greg and how you market your units or how you sell it, but it's proved successful in the one we were involved with. But it is something that I think that the township would be interested in exploring. I know the developer would like to explore with the township.
And I have one question left, and it should be short. We've heard a couple comments about the standard open market, single-family detached dwellings on the plan. I'm assuming since we're talking about it tonight and it's on the tentative plan tonight, that is the plan that the developer intends to move forward with? I mean, it's part of the fiscal impact study. It's been integrated throughout. So those are going to remain as open market, single family dwellings. They're not going to be age restricted.
That's how we envision it right now, yes.
That's all. Do you want to take a break first?
Are you going to have questions, Ms. Moody?
I do.
Okay.
And if we take a break, I'm
Yes.
I fear that I may lose them.
Oh.
But we can take a break.
Okay,
I'll just
are
write
you
them
okay
down.
going a couple more minutes? Okay.
Okay, one, this is maybe a little boring for some, but can you explain to me the process of, well, since a NID is needed for this development, what's the likelihood of it actually being approved for this development?
We've already talked to Chester County Redevelopment Authority as well as the company that floats the bonds. They're all comfortable that this qualifies and it's something that we've done in other municipalities in Chester County. And we're very comfortable with the process and we feel as though it's a 100% chance that it moves forward in that way.
My other question is with respect to the expenditures and revenue that this development will generate. I assume this fiscal analysis and the projections are based on today's numbers, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So given that we know that there is a gap in funding for emergency services, for emergency services, you know, for police and so forth, and that's today. How can you speak to, obviously costs are going to continue to go up, and this is projected development that it will likely come into fruition 6 years from now. The costs are going to be much different 6 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Assuming that taxes are not going to continue to raise on this development, how will we meet that gap? And how will this development, because it's going to have an impact, but we're not generating additional income from it.
Well, respectfully, I would disagree. I think there will be additional revenue generated, even if the tax rates for the township do not go up one bit. For example, people in the same jobs tend to earn more money year after year. So therefore, out of a single given household, even if nobody changes jobs, the earned income tax revenue to be generated from that household will go up year to year.
Not for these residents. These are residents that are 55 plus that are probably retired and or going to die.
Well,
so,
but we're assuming again that we're again assuming only 25% of them work. But for that 25%, we're assuming that their annual revenue, their what they make in money from their jobs will go up every year. Also, the real estate value is expected to go up. The assessments will not, unless there's a countywide reassessment, and I'm sure no one's holding his or her breath for a countywide reassessment. But the real estate transfer tax revenue will go up every year because the market value of the homes will go up as market value of homes goes up virtually every year in Chester County and has been the case for decades. So there will be additional revenue year by year, not in every category, but there will be additional revenue. The expenditures will also go up. I would think that there will still be a net surplus at the end of the day, year after year into the future. The better way to think about this is if you can picture a vessel holding an amount of water. The amount of water will rise or fall to its own level according to the vessel that it's in. If the vessel, if the amount of water goes up, for example, in a tax rate increase, then there might be more than enough money coming out of this development. Keep in mind that the average or median housing value in this township, according to the census, the number is from 2024, but that's the most recent number from the Census Bureau, is about $540,000, which means that these units are going to be significantly higher in value than the average or median value home in the township. That tells me that the expenditures are going to be comparable. Actually, they're going to be lower for the age-qualified development, but the revenue is going to be higher. There's going to be more tax revenue coming in, especially from the real estate tax, because these homes are significantly higher than the median value home in the township. And so that's what I mean by the level of water. And got one instance where you have $540,000 home is going to generate a certain amount of revenue, and the expenditures are going to be based on that. And you have an $800,000 or $900,000 home, which will generate significantly higher revenue. My view is that at the end of the day, this development will end up subsidizing other units in the township, other homes in the township, much like your non-residential development does. I don't think the other residents in the township are going to subsidize this development. I think it's going to be the other way around.
Okay, we'll see. No further questions.
All right, this seems like a good place to take a break. We'll break for about 10 minutes or so, and we'll reconvene after that.
Nope, that was a warning tap.
All right, so we're gonna reconvene now. Does the board have any more questions with regard to the fiscal impact?
Yeah, I have a couple more if you don't mind. You mind?
Go ahead.
Okay. So first, you had mentioned when you were talking about the NID, the consulting with the Chester County IDA. I don't remember who said that. You had mentioned when you were discussing about the NID, you were talking with the Chester County IDA. Is that true? Correct?
Chester County Redevelopment Authority.
Redevelopment Authority. Okay. What's that?
Chester County doesn't have a redevelopment authority. It's a Chester County Industrial Development Authority.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, they're different things. That's why I kind of.
Sorry. Just
Just to make you aware, Uwchlan Township also has an industrial development authority, and if you could consider working with that, whatever you need through that authority.
absolutely.
Okay. I also had a question for Mr. Babbitt. Mr. Babbitt, is that right? Yes, that's it. So I guess I'm still trying to come to terms with the fiscal benefit for the township. I can certainly see the fiscal benefit for the school district, although that's not my particular responsibility. I can see why having fewer kids, even though it's a school district who's supposed to be teaching the kids in the neighborhood, you would think they would want more kids. I like kids. I think families are important. Little editorial there, but I can see why it's wildly more valuable for them. But I looked at the lot. You said the lot sizes are larger. Did you know the lot sizes are about 5 feet wider for the open market single family homes than for the age restricted?
I did not know that.
Okay, so they're not. I don't think that's a large amount, but I agree that it is a little bit larger.
Yeah, but the homes themselves are going to be significantly larger.
From how many units you can place on the development, you'd agree that they're going to be pretty similar, although be maybe a little bit less if you went all.
If you're talking about singles versus singles, then yes.
If you were going to just increase the lot size 5 feet for standard instead of, you would agree that there might be a slight reduction, but it'd be small. Reduction.
Right, but that would be a reduction for the age-qualified single-family homes, not the age-qualified carriage homes. The age-qualified carriage homes are going to be on significantly smaller lots, I would think.
Okay, but you could have, you agree that you could have open market carriage homes as well, right?
Certainly.
Yeah. And they probably wouldn't have very much difference in lot size.
Compared to
the age restricted.
Yes, that's probably true.
So you could, and maybe you're not the right person to answer this, but if this were, if someone waved a magic wand and turned this into an open market rather than age restricted, and didn't change much about the essential layout, you'd have a close to the same, probably a slight reduction in homes, but not massive reduction.
That's probably true. Yes.
And based on your fiscal analysis, it just appears to me that if that were the case, the fiscal, that we would go from a marginal, and that's if you buy, and I've disputed some of the expenditures, but a marginal positive to a much stronger positive, because the revenue, even though the percent, the differential between expenses and revenue is about 400, I think. Let me get this right. Is about $939 for the standard single family detached.
Yes, that's correct. $939.
Whereas for the age qualified standard detached, you agree it's $435.
Yes, that's correct.
So it appears to me, based on that, that if it were not age qualified, it would be more profitable, or not profitable. The revenue would be more net positive for the township.
On a dollar basis, yes. On a percentage basis, no.
Yeah, so we would have, you would say we would have more expenses, but we would have more revenue to pay those expenses.
Both expenditures and revenue would go up, yes.
Okay. And they would go up by a greater degree than what is currently on this fiscal analysis, you would think? It would be greater than $214,000.
Oh, what would be, are you asking what would be the net impact? The
No,
bottom
I'm
line?
not asking you, just saying is if it would be greater than the current, this analysis.
That's more difficult to say because both revenue and expenditures will go up with standard open market development. And also, I would assume unit values would go up as well. So there's all kinds of variables going on here. It's difficult to give you a seat of the pants projection. Typically, age qualified developments generate greater annual surpluses, both to municipalities and school districts, than open market developments, typically.
Are you aware of, I mean, and I know you did the analysis, but you're aware of the balance of our, I mean, you kind of laid it on the fiscal, but that we are much heavier weighted on earned income tax in Uwchlan Township than we are in property tax?
Yes, very common in municipal governments that do charge the earned income tax.
And we're at the legal limit for our earned income tax rate for just EIT, not considering the open space.
Yes, that's correct. But that does not include the additional open space tax, which is also an earned income tax.
Yes, but you agree that open space is restricted to certain uses?
Absolutely, yes, it is for capital expenditures to purchase open space. Yes,
right. So not fungible, right? So, I lost my train of thought. So any additional, if we're in a situation where to raise more income, raise more revenue, excuse me, for the township, we're restricted to essentially the property tax increases.
there are limited options available to the township. Yes, the obvious one, the most obvious one, is to increase the real estate tax rate, the millage rates. The township also has the option, if it wants to focus any tax increase on non-residential uses, can increase the real estate tax millage and then offer a homestead exclusion, similar to what the school district does, and about 70 or 80 or 90 municipalities throughout the Commonwealth. Hatfield Township in Montgomery County is one. So what that would mean is that the tax rate would go up, but a certain level of assessed value of each home that is owned by its residents, a home, a homeowner situation, the first $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, whatever the number turns out to be, would therefore not be taxed at all, and therefore they could wind up actually being a net negative, a reduction in the tax burden on homeowners who own their own homes, whereas the bulk of the rest of the township, especially the non-residential development, would end up paying that tax increase.
So, but ultimately, someone would be paying that tax. So, I mean, to balance our book, where someone's going to have to pay something.
Well, yes, barring something like increasing revenue from shared funds from Harrisburg, for example, or something else. Yeah, those days are coming to a close. What was it? The American, the ARP was COVID era funding from the federal government to the municipality. I believe that money is gone now, and that was a significant amount of money for several years back in the previous parts of this decade.
So I guess what I'm driving at is it really does seem to me, and I think that the age that for Uwchlan Township specifically, not for the school district, would you agree that just using back of the envelope estimates that the age restriction is reducing the net revenue to the township for similar sized, if the similar sized developments for age restricted versus open market?
I don't think it's the age restriction itself that's reducing the revenue. I think it's the difference in the market value of the units that causes a difference in the revenue.
Okay, but then in any case, the development itself you'd change the character, but so the homes might be bigger, but you would get a bigger net revenue increase for the township with open market.
I think that is likely true, not guaranteed, but likely true. Hey, if you have a development of 492 units, each of which had a market value of $1.2 million, yes, the township would see an awful lot of tax revenue coming in. And if they were open market, then there would be even more tax revenue coming in because we're assuming that not many people living in open market units will be fully retired. There will also be an increase in expenditures because there'll be more people per unit. But nonetheless, $1.2 million per unit generates a lot of revenue on a per unit basis that covers a lot of costs.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Just have one follow-up question, and I'm not sure who of all of you to direct it to, but Mr. Colagreco, you had outlined your involvement with the Neighborhood Improvement District and referenced the MPC and some of the provisions in there. And so I'm wondering if you can help me understand if this model were to successfully move forward with a NID, you know, essentially financially assisting the development, what kind of resources and time the staff here in Uwchlan Township would need to devote to the execution of that.
In my experience with the NID, very little time with the staff. I mean, the NID is a vehicle which essentially provides financing mechanism to the developer to construct these improvements. The township would have no more involvement than it would normally have if it were not a NID. I mean, you would still come on this site, you would inspect the improvements, there would still be an escrow posted with the township for the improvements, all of those things you would normally do with any development. But the imposition of the NID, I mean, I'm racking my brain here to think of where it would cause an additional burden to the township. It's actually meant to do just the opposite. But as far as the township's role in the development, that doesn't change. We would still post the maintenance or financial security. There would still be a maintenance bond posted for dedicated improvements. I may be missing something, but
You had mentioned in your experience that sometimes there were members of the staff on the board of the.
it doesn't have to be the staff. I mean, in West Goshen, I think originally it was a couple of the supervisors. I know you'd love to volunteer your time for another board, but it can be anybody. I mean, it could be, I shouldn't say it could be anybody. It should probably, I think it was in that township was the supervisors. I think it could be planning commission members. It could be, maybe it could even be non-governmental employees. I never went that deep into who it could be, but I know the municipality can have seats on the NID board. I know that. And however those seats are filled, I would have to check on that.
And in the formal establishment of the Neighborhood Improvement District, there would be, I assume, a formal hearing, legal expenses that are borne by the township for the adoption of that.
Well, in my experience, that gets passed on. I mean, that gets passed on to the person that's trying, sorry, Greg, but the entity that's trying to establish the NID. They finance, the hearing cost. Any municipal cost is passed through. And that's part of the bond cost. I mean, the NID is a fancy way of Wall Street actually participating. They float the bonds that would pay for these initial upfront improvements. And that would be incorporated in the cost of the bonds.
And in your experience, just kind of referencing what I had brought up earlier regarding potential costs associated with, for example, failing infrastructure that the township might need to take immediate action on.
Yeah.
Yes, they have a mechanism to
lien.
litigate that, later. I lost my train of thought. Is there a financial surety built in as a mechanism for that through either the NID or the HOA?
Not in the NID that I'm familiar with, or the NIDs I am familiar with. Is there a way to do that? I couldn't say yes or no, because again, I never was asked that question. There might be.
There will be reserves though in the HOA.
Yes. Separating the HOA.
Correct.
I think the question was NID directed. Yeah.
Through either, honestly. Okay. All All right, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Moody, anything further?
Well, you kind of just hit on it, the reserve and the HOA. Will there be a certain percentage that the HOA will have to maintain with respect to the reserve funds?
Yeah, what the HOA will do is they will establish a capital reserve. I mean, they set aside funding as part of the annual assessment or monthly assessment, however they assess. There will be a portion of that assessment that's set aside and put into a reserve fund so that, you know, you may not need to repair your roads in year one, but you don't want to hit everybody in year 20 with a $3 million private road improvement cost. So over those 20 years, you're incrementally part of your HOA assessment is set aside in a capital reserve fund for stormwater management, for roads, anything that's privately owned and maintained by the HOA. In this subdivision, I didn't hear anybody saying anything about, I don't think there's any dedication of any stormwater facilities to the municipality. I think this is all going to be privately owned and maintained. So the HOA would have to set aside reserve for that. Private roads, same deal. Landscaping upkeep, same thing. Recreation, the same thing. I guess the only public expense in the subdivision would be Lionville Station Road. I can't think of anything else that's being dedicated. I mean, as far as the site improvements go.
Not that would be dedicated. There are going to be other, obviously, municipal expenditures.
Yes.
But not involving dedication.
No, I'm talking about land use issues, not police, not fire. I'm just talking about development issues.
Sewer.
Sewer. Thank you.
All right, so we have Dr. Dewey here. Do you have any questions or comments with regard to what you've heard here on the financial impact?
Yeah, thank you. Do you need my name? Yeah, my name is Dottie Ives Dewey, and I am I'm sorry. Absolutely, it's Dottie, Dottie, and then it's two last names just to be confusing. It's I-V, it's in Victor, E-S, and then Dewey, D-E-W-E-Y. So I have been working with Tom Comita on looking at both the fiscal impact study that was submitted and the emergency services study that was submitted. Just a little bit of my background. I currently serve as the interim dean of the College of Business and Public Management at Westchester University. Previously, I was a professor of planning, and even before that, I was a professional planner. I worked in the area, and I also, along with Mr. Hetzel and Mr. Babbitt, also have an AICP. Tom Comita and I spent some time looking at the fiscal, and I will say, you know, with the fiscal, that Mr. Babbitt follows a very standard methodology.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It sounds like you're going to be making some statements. I think it's probably worthwhile to have you sworn in, if that's okay.
Oh, okay, sure. I was just sitting down or should I stand up? I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So the fiscal follows a very standard methodology, and as you know, all these questions have come up. It's, you know, evident that when you do these studies, you have to start with a whole bunch of assumptions, right? So I do want to ask just one question. Well, might be a couple questions related to a couple of the assumptions. And so much of this is pegged on the estimated value, right, of the properties and sales values. Where did those numbers come from?
Sales numbers are based on our market knowledge.
Okay. So so you would have provided those sales, and you're confident that in this community with that product, that those are reasonable numbers?
Yeah, over the last 33 years, I've sold over 4,000 properties in metropolitan statistical area.
Okay. Okay. I was just curious about that. And then, David, this is probably for you. With the multipliers that you used, I'm just curious. understand the multiplier for the market units is 3.5, which feels reasonable. With the, you use two different multipliers with the age qualified single family detached and with the carriage homes. And was that all from where did that come from?
It comes from the same, no, not the same, but a similar study by our friends at the Rutgers University Center for Urban Policy Research.
Know them well.
Rochelle,
Yes.
Listikin, those
Okay.
guys.
And
They,
that was two different unit types, or was
yes,
it on the size of the unit?
no, it's two different unit types. They put out a document a number of years ago called Who Lives in New Jersey Housing?
Yep.
Which most of that document has to do with residential demographic multipliers for New Jersey, which obviously don't apply here. But it also includes studies having to do with different styles or different types of development and demographics from those that are not just from New Jersey, but from the Northeast United States. Age qualified development is one, transportation oriented design is another, and a third is Mount Laurel housing, affordable housing, a different set of demographics based on the ability of a typical household to afford the units and so forth. So it's all from the Burchell and Listikin, the Center for Urban Policy Research at Rutgers University.
Okay, which I will say is a very legitimate source for these multipliers. I was just wondering why they were slightly different, but it was
Yeah.
because of the unit type.
Yes, normally for the documents that I'm sure you and I have used many times for open market units, like for Pennsylvania, for example, it's differentiated by dwelling type, singles, townhouses, apartments, and so forth, by dwelling size in number of bedrooms, by dwelling value, either by rent or by price, and by tenure, ownership versus rentals have different demographics. For the age qualified units, it's only dwelling types. That's the only differentiating factor between the different demographic multipliers, not value, not tenure, not size.
Okay, okay. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, again, with some of just the assumptions that are built in the analysis, and again, not trying to get too technical here, but the way the per capita multiplier methodology works, which is a very accepted methodology. It looks at, as Mr. Babbitt described, all of the costs for the township, all of the existing residents. So you take total cost divided by total residents, and it comes up with a, per capita, per person cost, which you then, if you project out the number of residents that are going to be in that community, multiply it by this per capita cost. That, in essence, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but that's what gives you the, basically the estimate to the township of the cost. But in the study, you then reduced that number for the residents living in the age qualified communities. And so if you could maybe explain, and it's reduced by almost 30%. It was a pretty big reduction. So what did you take out, and what was the basis of making that reduction?
Yeah, I came across a study from a large development of several thousand units in the western part of the United States, but the ideas are still the same, that demonstrated significantly reduced expenditures in certain categories. Public works, for example, police services, fire protection, sewer and water were others, but they aren't, strictly speaking, municipal functions here.
Okay.
They're going to be either private in the case of water or municipal authority in the case of sewer. The other one was emergency management, emergency services, EMS.
So you reduce, so you're assuming there'll be a lower cost for EMS, lower, if I heard you right, lower cost for police, lower cost for fire and street maintenance?
Yes, that's correct, but a higher cost for EMS.
Oh, higher cost
Yes.
for EMS. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so
I'd be happy to provide that to you. I have a PDF on my computer, a couple pages out of a book.
Okay, I mean, it innately makes sense. It's not something I typically have seen in fiscals, and I Tom and I were the ones who had asked Mr. Babbitt to change some of the other assumptions, which you appreciated that he did that. I guess you were presenting it as worst case scenario. I think maybe considering that reduction that you made on the cost side and some of those other reductions, I would call this a conservative scenario, not necessarily worst case, but a conservative estimate of what the fiscal impact would be. And so I am, I think it's reasonable, again, under what was presented, to expect that there would be a positive fiscal impact around $200,000, right, give or take. But I want to point out, and again, there have been questions about this, that with this kind of fiscal impact analysis, you're looking at operating expenses. You're looking at how the township services are being provided today, and almost assuming that you can then absorb the additional demand for services coming from the community. So it's even stated in the report that this is looking at, basic operating expenses. And so you can expect, for just from an operating standpoint, to get this additional $200,000 a year. What it's not accounting for, which is what was presented in Mr. Hetzel's report, is the additional capital costs are not captured in that. So you have, whether it's additional staffing or equipment or trucks and, various things. If you get to a point where you need to hire new staff, you need to get a new fire truck, you need to, and I don't think this is the case, but expand a building, something like that. There's a capital impact that's not captured in the study. But Mr. Hetzel went out, and that's the approach that he took to go out and actually interview these providers. That's going to give you the best idea of what's going to be needed. I guess would it be appropriate for me to ask Mr. Hetzel a question? I don't have
Ask who?
Mr. Hetzel a question
I think
from
that's
his
fine.
study. Yeah, is that okay? So in your report, you basically say that there's a framework there, and I think you testify that there's a framework there to support the additional demands, but yet there will be, and I don't know the exact words they use, but there will be need to increase staffing, and there'll be additional capital costs. Like, how do you reconcile that?
I think it's in the way that it's a land use that's similar to what already exists throughout the township. It's not a different type of a land use that the emergency services providers are equipped to service today. And the operating, as was demonstrated in the fiscal analysis, the operating expenditures would be less, even as they escalate, than the anticipated revenue. So it seems to me a similar service profile.
So
So it's not counting the capital.
Okay. But are you saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying that let's say $214,000, I use your number, that will be enough to cover the additional capital cost?
I didn't measure what the delta could be, but keep in mind that this is just one development out of many. Every year, all the tax-paying ratables are paying taxes.
Sure.
And all of that. So that's kind of my logic there. And also keep in mind that if it's a $200,000 surplus each year, assuming that continues forward over 10 years, that's $2 million, which could be used for capital purposes, depending on how the township decides to allocate such funds.
And I will jump in and remind you that there's also that $2.2 million in real estate transfer tax revenue off the initial sales of the units, which I would thoroughly suggest the township should use for capital expenditures.
Yes,
And
and
that
I
will buy a lot of fire engines and a lot of,
Yeah.
police cruisers.
So that could be a very good source to help too.
Yes.
Because I think and we hadn't, Tom Comita and I had not seen the statements from the police department and the fire marshal and the ambulance corps, where they stated what they anticipated their capital costs to be. So I would encourage the township to look at that closely and to and just, recognize that those capital costs are not captured in the fiscal and in that $214,000, but to fully understand what those costs will be, because what they all say is that you're at capacity. So it's going to be very difficult to continue servicing not just this development, but all of the development that's happening without hiring new staff and without getting new equipment, vehicles, or whatever it is.
But Dr. Dewey, what you just said there, you're mixing capital versus operating. The expenditures in my analysis do include hiring new staff. Those are operating expenditures. They do not include buying the new police cruisers and fire engines. Those are capital expenditures, but they absolutely do include hiring new staff. And again, there's $506,000 of revenue that will hire potentially several new staff members, however the township chooses to do so. Police, paid firemen, public works people, recreation, administration, whatever this board and the staff choose to do with that money, that's what they choose to do.
Okay, I don't want to necessarily argue this, but I would say it's the $214,000 is what they can use to do what they want to do, and $214,000 is a reasonable amount of money, but in some cases that could be one additional staff person.
It could be, but again, I think the overall revenue at $506,000 could hire several staff people, and that's up to the decision of the board.
Again, I just think it's important to distinguish between the operating and the capital, and I know that there are exhibits that have been submitted where the providers of those services who are probably going to be the most constrained have been articulating what they might need and thinking about that in terms of potential capital contributions. That's all I have.
Are there any other, the emergency responders or staff that have other questions? Mr. Calagreco, before we move on, I want to give you an opportunity if you have any questions for Doctor. Okay. All right, we will open this up now to parties' questions. Mr. Empey? Ms. Widener?
First of all, I'd like to say I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I'm just hearing a lot of this for the first time tonight. But I do have questions. So the school district would get $4.3 million a year out of this? Is that what you said?
The school district is projected to receive a total revenue of about $4.9 million a year.
4.9 million.
Right.
Okay. And you're aware the taxpayers bought this property for 22 million 20 years ago, and they're now selling it for 64 million. So therefore, my question is, if the township's only getting 214,000 a year, but the school district's getting 4.9 million a year, could any of this money, which this property was paid for by the taxpayers, and now it's the taxpayers who would bear the brunt of this development, could any of this money go to buy down density? And I guess that question is for Mr. Lingo.
Yeah, and we've negotiated the density number to where it is now based on a variety of different things, including the contribution of some of the open space funds towards the conserved area.
Okay, but the 493 units, you can't go down lower than that. Is that what you're saying, even despite these figures?
The figures that you're referencing do not correlate to what the density that this property could handle from a development standpoint. This is where we've landed after really a year and a half of discussions with staff and neighbors, and this is the plan that we've come up with, juxtaposed to the by right plan that was initially submitted. By right plan that was initially submitted.
Okay, because the Planning Commission recommendation was for 400 or less. And that came after 2 years of public input. My other question is, you said this would generate $103,000 for open space funds through this community. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct, each and every year.
Okay. Are you aware that the open space referendum tax really came out of the advocacy to save this very property, Lionville Station Farm?
No, ma'am, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, well, it's been in the works for 20 years to save this farm, and that was the tax referendum that passed in 2024. And my question is, why are they paying for it? What are they getting for it? Because the open space is already gone once they move in.
Again, the open space tax goes into a special fund to be used to purchase parkland or conservation easements or develop parkland, and that is up to the discretion of this board.
Okay. You also said that people over 55 drive less than younger people. Where are you getting those statistics and that information?
Well, the number of trips generated is something that I think Mr. Ostomchuk is going to get into in great detail during his testimony later this evening or at a subsequent hearing. What I'm saying is that the municipal expenditures for maintaining roads would be lower for an age-qualified development compared to a standard development, open market development. And that comes from the study that I mentioned earlier in a book about age-qualified developments. That's one study that has quantified the difference in expenditures between age-qualified development and standard development in a very highly technical way that I've not seen replicated elsewhere. I'd love to, but I haven't come across it.
Okay, and you mentioned that these units begin at $800,000, go to $900,000, and then go to $1.2 million for the single standalone properties, right?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Would these units be worth more if the natatorium were removed?
I can't answer that. I really don't know. It's difficult to say.
Have you ever developed a property for an $800,000 and $900,000 home with a 74,000 square foot natatorium across the street? Have you done that before?
No, I have not worked on a natatorium before, the fiscal impact of such a use.
As the builder here, we do not feel that the natatorium brings the value of the homes down. We see it as a benefit.
Based on what?
Based on the services that it's going to provide.
Okay, but that's just a subjective. You don't have any exhibits to give the board or the community about that?
Well, we had Phil Aquatics had made a presentation in September. I don't believe you were there. And then they were here a couple nights ago talking about the different programming that they do. And we think for this type of community that programming is a benefit.
Okay.
In terms of the value of the homes.
So you don't think the value of the homes would increase if the natatorium were removed?
The value of the homes in this community, we do not feel would increase if the natatorium was not there.
Okay, and I'd also like to ask about the PRD ordinance, some of the qualifications. One of them says, new demands, it should provide optional approach to community development, including new demands in the housing market. I'm confused how this meets new demands in the housing market. Homes that begin at 800,000 and go up to 1.2, how does this meet new demands in the housing market?
We're very confident that this is a area that people want to live. It's very desirable. A new community like this, we feel we've done similar communities, not that distant from here, and that have also been roughly in those price ranges. So we feel confident in terms of the price.
Maybe I should have clarified what I meant by new demands in the housing market, really meaning young people in their 30s and 40s who cannot afford a single family home at these prices. How does this meet new demands?
Well, 55 plus community does not necessarily meet the demand of a 30-year-old purchaser. However, in this case, the majority of these buyers like to live within a zip code or two away from where they are now. So we feel that the homes they'll be coming from will be unlocked for people that are at younger ages. In other words, they'll be leaving those homes. So we have a housing shortage, not just in the country, which we've all read about, but here locally. And we feel that new homes to market will help alleviate the housing shortage.
And you've discussed this with realtors and understand that when people put their home up for sale, they may make more money, obviously, than when they bought it, but they still can't recoup enough to buy something of this price. You're aware of that?
We feel really comfortable that there's plenty of demand for this product here, and that these customers will be able to purchase these homes at these prices.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Engel.
Okay. A lot of numbers, spreadsheets. I'm kind of a back of the envelope guy myself. And so I just want to see if we can just clarify things or make it a little simpler. You do all of your analysis based on a per capita basis.
For the residential element, is this on? Yes, for the residential element, yes.
Okay. Using Dr. Dooley's comment about the best idea, looking at by interviewing the providers, and because that'll give us the best idea of what will happen. And so therefore switching to a case study analysis. All right. If the police say they're going to need one or more police hires at 230,000 annually, I think was the number. And then ambulance says they're going to need $100,000 to $200,000 a year annually. And then based on what Mr. Miller said, and I did find it, by the way, in the fire chief's memorandum for staff, it was about $450,000 capitalized over 15 years. So that's $30,000 a year annually. So 230 plus 100 to 200 plus 30. That's just police, ambulance, fire. Using your $506,000 income, the benefit to Uwchlan Township for one police person would be somewhere between $46,000 and $146,000, based on whether or not the ambulance needs are 100,000 or 200,000. Okay, so that's what would be left over, 46,000 to 146. That would be the surplus. Okay, as opposed to the 214 number that you've quoted in your per capita analysis. So I'm thinking of a range of 46 to 146 based on my envelope math, using the interview from the providers, giving us the best idea of what will happen. If we need more than one policeman, and that adds another $230,000, then we would not have a surplus. We would have a deficit between minus $184,000 and $84,000 a year. So using the interviews from the providers of what they think they're going to need, the possibility is that we could either have a surplus of up to $140,000 to a deficit of minus $184,000. That's the range based on providers' testimony. What's wrong with that analysis?
One thing I think is that you're assuming that every dollar of these additional personnel would go towards providing services to this one development. And I would suggest that if the fire company needs $300,000 a year or something like, or $50,000 a year, that would be an improvement to the fire department or fire companies that will benefit the entire township. And if the service area of the fire company extends beyond the township, it would benefit the region, not just the township. I would similarly argue that the one police officer that the township might need to hire for this development for 900 and what is it, 809 people. That's probably a higher ratio of officers to residents than the rest of the township population as a whole. And then to suggest that the township would need 2 new police officers for this 809 people living here, I would think is very high and unreasonable. That second officer might spend 10 or 20% of his or her time providing services to this development, and the other 80 or 90% of the time providing services to the rest of the township. So I think that the analysis that you're citing mixes the expenditures attributable to this development with expenditures that are attributable to a wider audience, the township as a whole.
Okay, respectfully, if all of our providers are saying, you know, we're kind of maxed out, so therefore adding anything else means we need more.
Right.
Like we're already, I view it in a different way. And if you're saying that they don't need more than 1 or more than 2, your testimony is that's an overestimation. So what you're saying is your opinion is differing than the opinion of our police chief.
Well, in certain ways, yes. By saying that the police department needs 1 additional officer at a cost of $230,000 does not mean that that officer is going to sit in a police cruiser in this development and serve no one else in the township. That's unreasonable. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I view things in terms of dollars and the burden of the dollars on the township due to something that's not here currently. So that's a difference of I hear what you're saying. You may be right, and I can't dispute that, but thank you for clarifying.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Matthews?
I would like a clarification on the neighborhood tax, the bond. He said that there would be a neighborhood tax of $300 plus or minus per month that would go into a bond for the overall improvements of the property, capital expenditure type thing. Is that correct?
Yes and no. When we were in front of the Planning Commission previously, and one of the questions was, you know, how did you get the number of units from what we submitted to the Planning Commission down to this 492? One of the things was we talked to the township about different things that would not cost the township money that we could utilize that could help us get the density down. And one of those things was enabling us to do a neighborhood improvement district special taxing area only for these new residents. And that neighborhood improvement district funds, there would be a bond that we could utilize to put in public improvements for the public good. And then that bond would be repaid by a special tax that these residents would be, it would be imposed upon these specific residents.
So, excuse me, you would be enacting the bond and taxing these residents initially to compensate for your loss of revenue from the additional houses that you cut down.
That was part of the give and take, that in order to get lower density, the NID will help us offset some of that, the cost. If there was only one home on this entire property, it could not support with the homeowners association fee all of the upkeep. So as we've reduced the number of units, that hasn't necessarily changed the price that we have to pay to purchase it. And also the road infrastructure is still pretty similar despite the less units. So the neighborhood improvement district helps offset some of the loss of units.
So then wouldn't that neighborhood tax need to be included every year in perpetuity to help cover for the homeowners association to pay for the maintenance of the roads and upkeep of the buffer berms, community center, etc.?
The two things, the homeowners association and their funds for upkeep have nothing to do with the NID. The NID is only for the improvements into the project. And then each of the homes will get a tax for a period of time. The one that we did most recently in Chester County, it was 30 years. Each home was responsible to make a payment, and that payment retired the debt on the bond essentially. But then after 30 years, if somebody bought that house, there would be no payment. If that homeowner wants to pay it all up front for 30 years, they can do that. Or if they want to wait, maybe they're only going to live there 10, and the person that purchases it would have a 20-year obligation to finish paying that home's NID assessment.
So how does the homeowners association, so the $200 a month fee for the homeowners association is going to cover maintenance of the roads, ongoing maintenance of the roads, the berms, the sidewalks, the amenity center, northern part of the property?
Yeah, we haven't yet established what the monthly fees will be, but the homeowners association fees will be covering all of the things you just mentioned.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a quick point of clarification? So is the $200 HOA association fee that you estimated into the impact, Alice, you just said you haven't yet determined what it is. So is it $200 or is it?
Yeah, 200 was the budget, but we haven't created it yet because we still don't know exactly what all of the improvements are. We haven't gotten to the stormwater management design and the street design and that type of stuff. But that's our rough budget.
It could be more.
Could be more, could be less.
Ms. Dwyer? Mr. or Mrs. Siegel? Mr. Martin?
This is real quick. What's the income Downingtown School District's going to get off of this property? That you already said, but I don't have it in front of me. Because we didn't have the numbers up on the board as you were reading. So we were, trying to. So what's the number the school district's going to get?
Do you mean
school taxes?
From the sale of the property?
No.
Or
When
from,
it's all said
from
and
this
done.
development?
Yep.
I project annual income to the school district at a little more than $4.9 million a year.
And what is their expenditures going to be for on that property at that time?
Almost exactly $1 million per year, but that assumes 21 school-age children from the age-qualified units that I don't think will be there. So I think it's going to be some significantly less than $1 million.
Right. And the township is a couple 100,000 we're going to get. And what are our expenditures going to be, which we've all, I'm going to answer that. Okay. It's going to be multiple. That's all. Correct?
Well, the projection is for about $292,000 in annual township expenditures from this development.
Right. So school district gets off pretty good.
The school district has a budget that is
No, I don't care about their budget. They're getting off pretty good on the deal.
$313 million compared to the township's operating budget at $15 million. It's a different scale altogether. Yes.
Yeah, maybe for you, not for me. Still out of my pocket.
Well, yes, but the school district's tax is much higher than the township's tax. You got to give the township a little credit there.
Just had to get this in my head. Like I said, there were a lot of numbers you were reading off, and we're trying to decipher everything. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Mr. McLaughlin?
We're here really to decide whether we should do a PRD or not do a PRD. So I'm going to try and stay at 40,000 feet, not get in the weeds, but the number of 21 school-age children is going to cost this district $1 billion is off by a factor.
No, it's not correct. 45 public school students generates expenditures of $1 million. Of the 45 students, 24 are projected to reside in the standard open market units, and only 21 are projected to reside in the age qualified.
Okay, because all along you kept saying 21 students, but it's actually 45.
45 total, yes, 21 from
And
age qualified.
Student at Downingtown Area School District costs the district what per year?
$22,438.
Now that's $7,000 more than what they put in their budget.
What they use an average cost per student figure that does not include certain things, and they do that because of, I think, state reporting requirements. What I do is I take the total school district budget, subtract a few pass-through items, and then divide by the current student population. That gives me this $22,000 and change per student, which is quite typical. It's actually a little bit on the low side, but it reflects the economy of scale from a relatively large district.
So in addition to Uwchlan Hills Elementary, Lionville Elementary, Lionville Middle School, East High School, Shimona Creek, the 6th grade center, Uwchlan Township is also supporting the school district for additional $4 million net. Plus the $65 million or $64 million Mr. Lingo's paying for the property on which they paid $22 million.
For this development in particular,
yeah,
the answer is yes. But for other development, I can't answer that.
So once we're talking about PRD or no PRD, there's no reason why we should be funding the school district to a further extent than we're already funding it. My opinion. So the other question I have for you, when you calculated the this multiplier you calculated as a per person basis, what would the multiplier be if you did it on a household basis? In other words, you're taking each individual person and using it as the multiplier, right. Whereas by the household, it seems to me that there would be a completely different calculation and result.
Yes. The per unit expenditures are in column H of the township spreadsheet. So for the single family detached open market units, it would be $1,627 per year. For the age qualified single family detached, $468. And for the age qualified carriage homes, $415 per unit. So it significantly varies according to the number of people who are living in each household.
I really don't know what that means. Like, we were not privy to that document, so it would have been nice if it had been put up on the screen, but that it wasn't.
I'm confident the document is available at the township for review.
All right, and one other minutia, although I said I wasn't going to do this. When you talk about a homeowners association, I have friends that live in $800 to $1 million townhouse developments very near here. Their HOA per month is $1,100. So to say there's $200 is really extremely misleading.
It is. I agree with you. I could increase the projection for the monthly HOA fees, but what that would do is it would increase the level of household income necessary to afford each unit.
That's right.
And therefore, it would increase the township and school district earned income tax revenue from those units. I chose to be conservative on the side of the revenue, which is conservatively low,
right,
and conservatively high on the side of expenditures in order to present what I would consider as a worst case scenario.
Right. And does that NID accumulate those funds to then do capital replacements? Or is the NID simply a bond that retires and then they have to float another bond if they have to redo all those roads and storm catch basins and culverts and
Yep. So sorry for the confusion. So the NID will only be for the installation of essentially public improvements. The maintenance to anything that's homeowners association maintained would come from the homeowners association dues and the initial contributions that they make when they
So they have
first.
to be pretty good budgeters. Because you're gonna have to replace all of those things in
Yeah,
fewer years than the
Lou
mortgage.
mentioned that they would have essentially a sinking fund based on the length that part of the analysis would be how long will these improvements last for, and that the association can also get assessments along the way.
So the developer of this property doing the infrastructure is hoping to recoup some of their costs from a NID that's gonna be paid by the homeowners.
Only for the public improvements.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they're paying for it twice. They're paying it for it in the price of the home, and they're paying for it again in the NID.
Well, so the NID is,
Or is the NID artificially lowering the price of each house?
the NID is enabling us to be able to deliver less units on the property. It's essentially a way for us to have less density on this property.
Right, but it's a left pocket, right pocket calculation.
Well, if we had more units, we wouldn't need the NID, correct?
Yeah, but you're getting paid to make improvements for a house you're selling.
Yeah, I'm not getting paid for it, but
Developer is.
so the cost of the improvements is what the NID would be covering.
Right. And a normal development, the developer pays for the roads and infrastructure and everything else associated with it at that time. Just an understanding. Thank you.
Mr. Chadsey? Mr. Fertel? Mr. Denny? Ms. Blatcher? Mr. or Mrs. Lager? Ms. May? Mr. Ippolito? And Ms. Strayhorn? Does the board have any follow-up? Does township or staff or professionals have any follow-up? Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute recess and talk about next steps?
Oh, it's like.
All right, thank you, everybody. I think we think this is a good breaking point for the night. Unfortunately, August is a full month of other things, I think, for both township as well as residents and other folks. So, we're gonna have to, we're gonna continue this. The next hearing next hearing date's gonna be September 8th at 6 o'clock. I know that's long, but we wanted to at least get these started, knowing that it's the summer and things intervene. But September 8th, we hope we can get it done. We have some other dates in reserve if for some reason we go over that are nearby that are not more than a week away from that, or about a week away from that. So, so we're just on the record. I want everyone to know, because there's not going to be a re-advertisement. This is the announcement that it'll be up on the township website and all, but it's not going to be another newspaper advertisement. Not that, I'm not sure anyone looks at that anyway. But it's September 8th, 6 p.m. at the township building.
Mark,
Yes.
if I could just add two things.
Yeah.
The first, because we didn't get to public comment this evening, we will extend the opportunity to provide written public comment via lsr@uwchlan.com until September 8th at 9 a.m. Additionally, I know we've heard a number of folks say that they didn't have a copy of exhibits or what it might be. I just wanted to provide a quick tutorial for everybody here and online on our website where to access those exhibits. And the additional exhibits that were provided this evening will be posted on our website at the same location tomorrow by the end of the day. But if you go here under government at Uwchlan.com, if you go here under government and then go to Lionville Station Road, there's a whole website dedicated to it. And at the bottom, you'll see this related documents. If you click that and then click view application documents, you'll see board exhibits and then applicant exhibits. And then there's the other documents that were submitted, but this will be updated tomorrow with the additional exhibits. And again, any of the parties or anybody that's interested can go look at both the board exhibits and applicant exhibits. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.